Thanks, members. Welcome to the Caithness Area Committee meeting this morning. You all know the various protocols. I don't need to remind everybody of that. Just be aware that the meeting's been recorded and subsequently could be uploaded to the Caithness Area Committee YouTube channel. So we are starting off. You should all have your agendas in front of you, and the first item on the agenda is. This is where I've got to learn how to scroll at the same time because we don't print our copies. Apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence, please?
I haven't received any, Chair.
Okay, would you like to do the roll call, please?
Yes. Yourself, Chair, present. Councillor Donny Mackay. Councillor Willie Mackay.
Present.
Councillor Mackey.
I'm present and good morning.
Councillor Rees.
Sorry, I'm present and good morning.
Councillor Rosie.
Good morning, everyone. Present.
Councillor Sinclair.
Present. Good morning, everyone.
And Councillor Tilt.
Present. Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Nice to see everybody here. We're going to the second part of the agenda, which is declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? Okay, we don't seem to have any declarations of interest. We'll move on to agenda item number 3. That's the previous minutes. Can we all agree the minutes of the previous meeting, please? Just nod your heads. That's perfect. Great. Absolutely fantastic. On to item 4, and that's matters arising, which is the action tracker. Just a brief acknowledgement of the action tracker, members. Members will know that we have already had a few changes to the action tracker. We didn't have the ability to be able to meet and update the action tracker since Councillor Nicola Sinclair left. But following that, we have recently done that. I would like very much if the members would agree that we change and update the action tracker so that it reads up to date in view of the most recent Caithness Councillors planning meeting that we've had, and that will be presented at the next area committee. Members should be reminded that the Caithness action tracker is a monthly meeting, and therefore there can be substantial changes quarterly. So we will arrange to put a narrative in with the action tracker so that the members of the public who are reading the agenda are seeing the fluidity between each of the quarterly meetings. Have any particular comments they would like to make on the action tracker? Thank you. Are members agreed with what I've just said there in terms of future reporting of the action tracker?
Agreed.
Thank you, members. We'll move on to the next item. Next item is, I have decided that we are going to vary the agenda, and item 9, do we have Alan Webster with us today? Alan, are you present?
I do indeed, Chair. Thanks very much for agreeing to take this item earlier to allow me to move on to other council business.
Okay, thank you very much, Alan. Members, we're going to take item 9 before item 5. And then I am also minded that Colin Howell is here and he has other meetings. There's quite a few conflicting area committees and other committees this morning, and our officers are having to flip between them all. So I've arranged for them to be accommodated accordingly. And after item number 5, we will have item number 8, and that will be presented by Colin Howell. So over to yourself in terms of item number 9, Alan. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair, and good morning, members. Quite a straightforward paper before you today, and hopefully in line with your expectations. It covers the place-based investment programme, which is a new Scottish Government funding stream, and not to be confused with the Council's similarly named place-based investment funds. Essentially, E&I committee agreed an area distribution of the grant as per the TCF approach that we did previously. This resulted in Caithness committee being allocated £178,123. The calculation used was exactly the same as the Scottish Government used when distributing the grant across the country to all 32 local authorities. We have had ward business meetings and various briefing papers on this matter. There was a joint meeting in October last year where members expressed a wish to look at established priority projects in the area being progressed by the council and asked officers to investigate those and bring them back to committee, and that's the purpose of this paper. There was a subsequent Ward 2 business meeting held late in December where ward members wished to investigate the prospect of using this particular fund, the place-based investment programme, for the damaged infrastructure project rather than the council's place-based funds, basically to reverse that decision. And the reason being that the council funds offer greater flexibility than the Scottish Government's funding stream here, which is capital only and has to be committed by the end of March. So I don't see any reason, members, to dwell on sections 4, 5 and 6 of the report, the objectives and background to the fund. We've discussed those at great length previously, and I think we're all familiar with those. So I would just like to jump to section 7, which is the actual detail of the proposals. I touched on the damage project there just now. Members of this committee on the 12th of August agreed to invest £60,000 of the place-based investment funds, the council funds, on this particular project. Given discussion with ward members, the suggestion is now that we use the place-based investment programme, the Scottish Government funds, and invest £75,000 in this particular project and free up the council funds. The project satisfies a number of the place-based investment programme objectives. It's capital in nature, the contract's awarded, all eligibility criteria are met. There is no impediment to doing this, members. The second project is the public convenience on Whitechapel Road, Wick. It's a council-led project. The aspiration is to invest £89,000 of your place-based investment programme allocation in this project. Again, a town centre revitalisation is a key objective of the PBIP, and the proposed works are capital in nature. However, there is a significant risk with this particular project, and that is that the match funding is not secure and anticipated contract award date is after the 31st of March 22. However, it was agreed at E&I Committee in September that the timetable is challenging, provided by the Scottish Government. It is welcome that we have a 5-year programme of funding, but the 1-year grant award letters and the expectation that we commit all funds by the end of the financial year is acknowledged to be a challenge, as I say. And the E&I Committee agreed to write to the Scottish Government seeking flexibility. And I think this is an example project that we would use to engage with Scottish Government officials to show the challenges that local authorities face, in particular the Highland Council, when prioritising particular projects and balancing it with timetables. The third project is a redesign of the bus stands at Riverside in Wick. Again, there have been a number of projects in this area to improve the area. It's been subject to vandalism, antisocial behaviour in the past. There's been CCTV works about to take place. The project is within the town centre funded improvements to the main car park. So it all fits within the town centre revitalisation objectives of the PBIP, and the hope there is to invest £14,000 in that particular project. Again, fits the objectives, it is eligible, but we've got a challenge with the timetable again, and the same applies here as with the public convenience on Whitechapel Road. Contract award is after the 31st of March, so we'll need to engage with the Scottish Government and request flexibility to carry over into the next financial year. The final consideration for members is the role of the Community Planning Partnership. A key requirement in the decision-making process agreed by E&I Committee was that members take account of the views of community partnerships when considering these investment decisions. I've indicated that a verbal update will be provided by the ward manager. I can advise that the ward manager has been unable to take these proposals to a formal meeting of the Community Planning Partnership, but has engaged with the chair, and the chair has advised that the proposed investments are in line with the aspirations of the partnership. So there's no conflicts there, members. And that's all I have to say just now, Chair.
Thanks very much, Alan. Members, there are recommendations that are on page 32, but before we actually have a look at agreeing to them, does anybody have any questions or comments that they would like to contribute to the meeting at this point? Councillor Carl Rosey.
Thank you, Raymond. I think it's appropriate that we thank the officers involved, each of them, you know, Alan, Mac and others. I know particularly in regard to the Ward 2 situation, we were we wanted to be able to act flexibly, and we needed to act at pace, and I don't think without their assistance we would have been able to achieve either. So it really is appreciated. There's probably a wee bit of housekeeping in regard to how some of the things played out, but I'm conscious you just look for a comment a minute, and maybe we can come back to that, Raymond. But just meantime, I wanted to excuse me, register my thanks.
Thanks very much, Carl. Councillor Willie Mackay. Morning, Willie.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you. Yes, I'm very interested in the redevelopment of the Riverside bus stance in Wick. It's very popular and has been for many years. But my little worry at the moment, Chair, is getting to the bus stance. The buses are really battling to get down that road with the cars, the amount of cars that's parked on the left-hand side. We had a raised table there to help the situation, but how far off are we of getting a double yellow line down that road to keep cars away from that road altogether? As you know, one of the buses there a year ago had a nasty little incident on black ice, and the approach to the bus stance is so important that we could get the buses down Whitechapel Road without going onto the pavement on the right-hand side.
Thanks, Willie. Good concern there. And Josie's actually in the meeting this morning. Morning, Josie. I know that you have the ability to be able to take up the concern that Councillor Mackay raised there just now and raise it with the appropriate officers. I think that Shane Manning will probably be the appropriate officer for this one, but maybe you'd like to comment.
No, you're quite right. It would be Shane, and I can feed back to him on that one.
Willie, are you happy with that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, that will make a huge difference. Huge difference. As we know, parking is sometimes a premium, and people will take every opportunity. But the quicker we can get the double yellow line on the left-hand side going down Whitechapel, that will give the buses much ease to get to the long-awaited bus stands down there, the Riverside. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, thanks, Willie. Does anybody else wish to speak on this? Thanks, members. For my own part, I'd like to thank all the members for their engagement, along with the ward manager, our new ward manager, Mackenzie Sutherland. A lot of work's been going into this. Alan, I'd like to thank you personally as well. You've done a great job, not just with this paper, but over the years, and been able to help us secure funding from various areas. This was the former town centre fund, as we like to, the Town Centre Regeneration Fund, but it is now the Scottish Government's place-based investment. I like the fact that you referred to examples of being able to balance off the timetable and the funding and being able to make the representation to the Scottish Government on that. Wish you well on that. But these are really, really important investments in the town. What I would like to also state is this is money that is not. This is money given to the council to administrate. We don't have the ability to be able to reprofile this cash for any other project other than the specific remit that we've been given it for. We will not be able to spend this money filling potholes, doing up roads. So we need to make that quite clear that there are specific ring-fenced funds that we have the ability to be able to cash in on and make our communities better. But sometimes that we might like to think that we could use that money in other areas. We can't. And Alan, if you've got any other last words to say, either that or we'll be thanking you very much and bidding you farewell and off to your next meeting, because I know that you're flying about this morning. Alan?
No, nothing else to add other than thanks, members, for the positive engagement in this process. It certainly makes life a lot easier when developing projects and sorting out the finances. So it's been a pleasure working with you over the term there, and I wish you all the very best in the future.
You're very welcome, Alan, and thank you very much. And our dialogue, your dialogue with all the members has not yet finished, as you know. So I look forward to seeing you soon, and we'll finalise these projects and let's get them delivered. Thanks very much. Members, we're moving on to item number 5. Stephen, I think, is it yourself that's delivering the update on item number 5, or is it Ali?
Chair, I think it's myself.
Oh, Kevin.
If it's
right, Kevin.
Police one, yeah. Thanks very much, Chair. And just to introduce myself, Kevin McLeod. I'm currently the temporary area commander for North Highland. After Jamie leaving, Scott, who should be in place, is currently absent from work, so it's myself that's covering here, previously been based in Dingwall. So the report's gone out for everybody, and I wouldn't propose to go through it piece by piece, but if you're okay, Chair, I'll just cover a few points and then happy to take any questions from there. Probably just going through the part in the report around Caithness at a glance. So the piece of work there around road safety and road crime, where overall there has been an increase, which I think is positive, and shows the sort of increase in proactive work linked to the visitor management group, linked to the North Coast 500 and locally by officers there. So we continue to get support from national units to support in and around Caithness to promote road safety in there. So one of the bits I'll touch on is the increase in drug driving, which we're seeing pretty much across the country, and in behind that there was quite a backlog with the labs managing to produce stuff, but we're now seeing some of these drivers who have continued to drive for probably 18 months to 2 years now being taken to court and action being taken against them, which is really positive for us. So that's beginning to come through slowly. Just moving down around antisocial behaviour disorder, which I know is key to a lot of the members. So there has been an increase, and we've seen that, and we're fully aware of that, and that's continued pretty much year to date, but also over that 5-year average. Try to put a little bit of context around some of that. We have seen a couple of incidents, just thinking back probably 2 months, where one incident linked to a licensed premises, which resulted in about 5 or 6 separate crimes. So one incident boosts the numbers by 5 or 6. So that can sometimes skew whiff numbers a wee bit, but not taking away from the fact that we're still undoubtedly seeing an increase in antisocial behaviour across Caithness. Positive to see sometimes the figures are difficult to actually work out, but in some ways you've got a slight decrease and increase around assaults, but something that we're continuing to focus on, and something that Steve himself has been working really closely on. Going down into accusative crime, so similarly to across the division, then accusative crime itself is down, although the worrying one, which is reflected again across the whole country, is frauds, and the majority of them being online frauds. And most of us will have seen people that have been victims of that, and quite often the elderly and vulnerable. So that's something that we continue to try and push out and raise awareness around, but the actual policing and inquiry into that is really difficult, because quite often those responsible are living abroad and operating from there. So a difficult and challenging set of circumstances. Probably one of the key things for ourselves is around the vulnerable people, and where you'll see there the increase, and over the 5 years it's increased by a number, but around domestic cases. So I'm not saying it's positive to see an increase in domestic cases. I certainly don't mean that, but the positive thing for me is that people feel confident and are able to come forward to actually report these, because we know these crimes are going on. And the phrase that Ali used to me last week was, we often see is not the right word, but we often comment on less cops on the street, but more often than not, they're in people's houses and dealing with these types of incidents, which we know are going on day in, day out, right across the county there. So something that we're continuing to focus on and work with partners around. We have had a good bit of work recently with a funded officer who's a harm reduction officer, in particular working with 4 or 5 individuals in Caithness around their involvement in the drug scene and trying to influence them out of that. So that's something that we continue to work on. A couple of other points I'll touch on, Chair, is around, you'll see further on the report around missing persons, and predominantly the numbers around that are linked to looked after children. So that's something which both locally and divisionally we are doing some work with the council around, and in particular around the risk assessment for the placement and their ability to ensure that those kids who are in difficult enough situations are actually kept safe. So linked to that, again, we've seen an increase in vandalisms, but we can associate them quite a lot to incidents which have kicked off, unfortunately, in and around these care homes. So we're aware of it, and we're working through that. For information of yourselves, members, then we currently have a job advertised, a funded post advertised in Caithness for pretty much an engagement officer, a community engagement type officer. And that's led through a national division through the Partnership and Preventions division. And the purpose of that officer will be to actually link in with the communities. We'll be linking in with partners to try, one, to improve relationships from our own side to the communities, try and increase confidence around that, but also just to try and make it a bit more cohesive with pulling some of the partners together there. Going ahead, we continue to link in with the visitor management group, and the other piece of work that we are looking at trying to influence a wee bit more is in relation to a unit which has been set up based in Inverness around community investigation, in particular the crime and the vulnerabilities, which probably goes back to some of that looked after children and some of them getting drawn in. So that's just some of the highlights, Chair. If members are happy with that, I'm happy to take any questions from there.
Members, do we have any questions, please? Councillor Rosie.
Thanks, Raymond, and thanks, Kevin, for your report. I think it's I find it really encouraging, listening to your report when you speak about community links, cohesion between partners, because there has been a tremendous amount of work going on in Caithness in regard to improving these things. So, I think we've got a lot to be optimistic about for the future, and it's going to be really interesting to monitor reports in the future. So, more power to everyone involved. And it's really interesting. I actually had a very brief conversation with our housing principal yesterday regarding the Housing First initiative. I mean, I think there's a huge amount of scope to address some of the issues and ensure that we get, appropriate measures being taken in the community, to alleviate so much pressure. We often speak about, in the past, we've spoken about Police Scotland being the first responders and, dealing with possibly things that beyond your own remit, so it's good. We seem to be heading towards addressing these issues. So thank you very much. Thanks.
Thanks very much for that, Carl. Councillor Rees.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Morning, Kevin. Nice to see you again, albeit on a screen. Hopefully next time round, if we're back re-elected, we'll be able to meet in person, hopefully. A few points. I'm very glad, Kevin, you started off by mentioning road safety, because probably intelligent guess, it's probably still the #1 concern, perhaps, of people in the county. I just want to briefly mention, partly because it is in the press today, I'm absolutely delighted that the camera partnership have started to deploy the camera van at locations summarised where I think the public would like to see the van. I'm talking about places like Keith, Dunnet, hopefully Castleton, the Merkel Strait, where there's been in that general area a number of concerning accidents, and particularly the Force Strait. Just thinking about it right now, actually, all these are North Coast 500 locations actually as well. But it's been fantastic. I'm not quite sure what's changed in that the partnership have suddenly decided that they are able to put the van in these locations rather than, dare I say it, parked at the Mound, where the public perception is there's no particular safety issue right there, but that has been discussed many times. It's really good that the vehicle can now be used where people like community councils and schools, parents are saying they'd like to see it. I'd like to kind of add, although it's not in my ward, I hope my Ward 3 colleagues would agree, Watton outside the school would be another location perhaps where I think people would like to see the van, particularly at obvious time at school times. So really pleased about that. And then secondly, and I know I'm straying slightly into operational matters, but forgive me, if you will, many years ago when I still was in the same job, we purchased a very smart, shiny, long wheelbase Land Rover. It was a very good looking vehicle, and you probably know what I'm going to say. Now, 10 years later, it is no longer a smart looking vehicle. I need to be slightly blunt. It's streaked with rust. The livery is very faded, and I know there's not much you can personally do about it, but I'm just highlighting the fact that I think Police Scotland, I know what the vehicle replacement policy is, and it's changed a lot from the quote good old days, but just as we used to have to do, you're still reliant at times during bad weather on borrowing police vehicles from CNC. It's a great thing. It's partnership working and all the rest of it. But I just make a plea, particularly in wintertime right now as the snow falls. I think having to rely on one very elderly Land Rover, given the history of what's happened at the Ord in the past, we could do with better. And it was the case in the past. There was more availability. I'm just mentioning that. Thirdly, slight shopping list. Could I ask you about the opening hours of Thurso Police Station, which is obviously my ward? I think it's really down to one member of staff now. It's a busy police station. It's on the North Coast 500. From about sort of March to October, when I drive past, which is most days, regularly see people queuing up outside, wanting to get in to speak to a police officer. For a station in a town of this size, I think it deserves more, if possible. And finally, again, a positive note. In the past, some of the attendance at some community councils seems to have been a little bit patchy, but my impression is recently that that's improved considerably. And recently, don't to embarrass Stevie too much, but at a recent meeting of Thurso Community Council, Sergeant Mezzels gave a very good and informative update, which was very well received by the Community Council. So just really the one question, Kevin, the opening hours for Thurso Police Station and a plea, or at least our support, something possible to get four-wheel drive availability improved slightly, particularly in the winter months. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Rees. If you don't mind, I'll take in Councillor Mackay before I come back to you, Kevin, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Councillor Mackay.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, Kevin, hope you're noting all this down. You've got a lot on today. The police report is always very interesting to me, absolutely, and always been for many, many years, been a high mileage driver across the whole north of Scotland. Kevin, Matthew did mention the camera van. I see it everywhere in all the locations between here and Inverness. Matthew did mention about it parking up at various places where it wasn't really a problem. I remember very well a friend of mine travelled all the way from Wick behind an Arctic lorry to the 2 mile from Navadale, and he overtook going into Navadale, Helmsdale, and he got done by the police camera was sitting up on the hill and gobbled him at 85 miles an hour. Oh, well, that was a great disappointment to him. But however, Kevin, getting away from that, Kevin, I'm always interested in the technology and the improvement that is underway in comparison with the police. And you had, well, there was high-powered cameras recently launched on the A9 between Perth and Inverness, and they could detect a gentleman or a lady on the phone coming up that road. It was a trial by the Scottish Government, and I wondered, are we any near to getting this realised? Because there is a terrific amount of people still using the mobile phone. I see them every other day. I'm not a bad user now of the mobile phone with hands-free, but it is a problem, and you still see it every other day. And I just wondered if this technology was just about to be enforced, picking out people from a long distance with a high-powered cameras, and that's it. You're done for the mobile phone use when you're driving. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. Councillor Donny Mackay. Donny, I can't see you. If you're on mute, you might want to make sure.
I've got it now, Chair. Thank you.
All right,
thanks, Chair. Kevin, the biggest problem we have in Thurso is round the town at night. The speeding is something cruel. I sit in a house at a weekend and I can hear it in my house. Is somebody got to get killed before we do something, you know? I think that we need to put cameras on the street or the speeding cameras somewhere that will stop them, because the roars of the cars and the speed of them is something horrendous. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Donny. Carl, do you want to come back in? Please,
Please,
members,
if you don't mind.
don't make a habit of this throughout this meeting. I am so, this is probably the reason you put me in the chair, so that I don't do what I'm trying to control here. Thank you.
Well, I apologise, I'll be very brief. It's just a prompt on, you know, I know it's operational here, but just to ask Kevin a question. Kevin, I was interested, because we're speaking about enforcement, and I'm always keen to think about prevention around then. And I saw it's only on social media, and I think it was actually fire service. They spoke about VR headsets, which I presume is visual reality, but using these as training aids, you know, in communities. I've never come across it. I just, you know, it seems like a sensible measure. Who would procure them? Who would pay for them? I would be glad to discuss that in the community. But just, I see you nodding your head. So if you are aware, it'd be good. And if you can point us in the right direction, then we can, you know, begin discussion about if it's appropriate and how we get them. Thank you.
Members, there are no other questions. I'm going to go to Kevin, but Kevin, I have a couple of observations myself once you're finished. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. I've got a post-it here with some notes, so hopefully I've picked up on most of them. Councillor Rees, yeah, I know exactly where you're coming from in relation to that vehicle, and it was discussed actually at a health and safety meeting just in the last couple of days, looking to try and get that replaced. Yeah, I've been beating exactly the same drum around the availability of 4x4s and thinking back to the, you know, to the disasters on the Ord, so where we know that came from, and I think that unfortunately has been forgotten at a corporate level. So I continue to fight that corner. In relation to, I'm jumping about here a bit. In relation to the camera van, that's something that Ali and myself had a conversation with the divisional commander with last week. There is a new manager within the camera enforcement unit, for want of a better phrase, and that we have seen some changes, and we continue to try and influence some of that changes, in particular into some of the smaller communities that see that passing traffic. So something that we'll continue to work on. In relation to your comment around the opening hours of Thurso, yes, there is only one member of staff there. I am aware in the background of some reviews around opening hours, but if you're okay, I'll take that away and we can try and feed some information back around that one, as opposed to me just making blatant open comments just now. And yeah, community councils is a challenge to get to them, and it's how we really refresh some of that ideas as we're going on to engage with the community councils. So hopefully I've covered the points there for yourself.
Sorry, boss, do you mind if I come in on the community councils?
Certainly.
So yeah, there's been a long-standing issue at the moment, trying to get officers to attend community council meetings, and we do have identified officers allocated as liaison officer for the community councils, and hopefully they're managing to keep email contact, but trying to get them to the meetings is very, very challenging, because ultimately these meetings are during back shift hours, and it relies on that officer being on back shift at the time and being available to attend these things. We did have a system that seemed to work before, where we put like a monthly report and it broke down each individual community council area. However, because the computer system changes that happened, we weren't able to continue that. But we're now trying to put some work together, try and reintroduce that, so at least if there's not a police officer present physically at the meeting, they'll still have a report about the stats and what's been going on, and still have that line of communication through email if there's any issues raised during the meeting. And we're kind of hoping that this is going to be a bit of a compromise and an improved service to the community councils.
Chair, if it's okay, I'll move on. So Councillor Mackay's comments around the cameras in the A9, I have to put my hands up and say I have absolutely no knowledge of that and high-powered cameras. So Councillor Mackay, I'm sorry, you're technical knowledge is far better than mine, I'm afraid. So I'll make some inquiries into it and I'll feed something back to you, if you're happy with that. Councillor Donald Mackay, yes, completely understand the concerns around speeding in around towns, Thurso, Wick and other areas across the north. So what I'll maybe do is I'll tie in with Stevie after the meeting, and we've got a couple of young officers that are keen on some road traffic work, so we'll maybe try and put a little bit of a task into them to try and look at a bit of work, and we'll tie in with Donnie McKinnon and road policing just to see if we can give that a little bit of attention. Councillor Rosie, not so much about the VR headsets, but I certainly know that just in the last week, our road policing colleagues took delivery of some new equipment which they launched in the Eastgate Centre last week with elderly drivers, and it was really just around trying to raise awareness. It's a new computer system. I'm not sure whether it's VR based, but again, I can speak to Donnie McKinnon in there, and we can have a look at that.
Thanks very much, Kevin. Members, there are nobody, doesn't look as though anybody apart from Councillor Mackay. Would you like to respond?
Well, yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks for allowing me back. And just to say to Stephen, I wouldn't worry too much about not appearing at community councils. I know the community councils would like to see you there, but I've been involved with community councils for 15 years, and 15 years ago, you're the #1 agenda hit with the community councils. There were loads of people coming to see you, and we know nowadays, I've gone around a lot of community councils, and they know that your resources are not what they used to be. So I wouldn't worry too much about it, but if you can give a printout, fair enough. But they do understand that resources are not so plentiful as they used to be. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks for that comment, Councillor Mackay. I'd like to offer a couple of observations. Hopefully they'll be helpful to Stephen and Kevin. They're very sympathetic of what Councillor Mackay just said, actually. But firstly, in terms of road safety, Councillor Rees mentioned that earlier on. The Association of Caithness Community Councils is meeting next week, and the police only have a presence at that. There are a number of issues that are being raised by many of the community councils. If it's agreeable with members, I think as the Secretary of the Association of Community Councils, I'd like to put that on the agenda and suggest that for the Chair, Ron Gunn, so that we can have that as an open discussion between all the community councils while the police are there, and also I believe that roads will be there as well. And I know that Colin Howell is planning a meeting some folks to do with the safety issue, Matthew, or maybe the meeting's already happened, but you know what I'm talking about there, Matthew. And the second point is, we know that the resources of the police are stretched. I think that we need to have an open discussion in terms of what it is that we're actually trying to feed to the community councils. What's the best way of doing that? What is it we're trying to achieve? What's the strategy behind it? And it's also something that we have the ability to be able to discuss with all the association, with all the community councils that are on the Association of Community Councils next week. And I'd like to suggest that as an outcome of this meeting to the Association of Caithness Community Councils Chair as well, if members are sympathetic to those suggestions. And also, Kevin, are you happy for me to do that?
Chair, certainly from my own side, yeah, absolutely. The setup around that association is an ideal platform, I think, to have that discussions. And you're right, as Councillor Mackay just raised, as producing reports that people don't read, this is wasting everybody's time. So getting them accurate in that, I think, would be ideal. So yeah, fully supportive of that.
Okay, members, if you're happy to note the contents of the verbal report that's just been given to us from the police, we'll bid them goodbye and thank them very much for the contribution to today's meeting. Thanks very much, Kevin.
Thanks.
Members, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. We are going to move on to, as I agreed, I said we were going to vary the agenda. I'm now moving to item number 8, and I think that Colin is with us, Colin Howell.
I am, Chair.
And morning. This is the Area Roads Capital Programme from 2022 to 2023. We know that members have monthly dialogue opportunities with the roads crew and have already had a discussion about the capital programme in general from last year and this year. I know that Josie Sutherland is with us as well. Welcome, Josie. But I'll hand over to Colin, and it's between yourself and Josie to talk to this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity of taking this paper early. Just to let you know, members, I'm attending each area committee to talk through the capital programme for roads, and clearly the reason I'm doing that is for us to have a work programme ahead, and we agree that early so that we can plan and deliver that in the future is really important. So the opportunities here are to identify the money that we've got allocated through the capital programme. And you will see from the Appendix 1 that we've got in the order of £21 million worth of investment into our road network across Highland. And what we are seeking to do is to go to each area committee and allocate out the programme of works. So we are keen to do that. That programme of works, once approved, will allow us to work as a roads team together to plan and deliver those works as efficiently as possible, and that will be a combination of internal resources, material supplied by suppliers, and use of contractors where we feel that that is important. And members would also have been aware of the work that we've done in terms of the relationship between the capital and the revenue budget to understand that interrelationship. Now, Josie will be given the opportunity when I stop talking to take you through the detail of the paper. But I should also possibly mention that there's a section in the paper called risks, and us engineers identify risks as things that may happen, and then what we try and do is we mitigate those risks. So we identified that a risk here that if we don't get this right, there's a potential for the roads to deteriorate, and the paper before you is the mitigation measures that we are putting in place to try and make sure that risk doesn't materialize. So the opportunity for us is to spend the money as wisely as possible. But what we also need to be aware of, members, is there's other mitigation that's going on in addition to the capital investment that you're seeing before you, and that is the engineering redesign process that we as a council are engaging with. We've had 2 workshops with members, and we're taking a paper to the redesign board on the 18th of this month, and the purpose of that paper is to work together a strategy to make sure that we spend the money allocated across the council to roads to be the most efficient and effective as we can. And we will certainly see to do that. That piece of work is ongoing. So I give you the opportunity to go along to the redesign board, understand the mitigation measures and plans we have in place to make sure that we spend the money as wisely and effectively as possible to mitigate against that risk of deterioration. So Josie, can I hand over to you and you just take us through the detail of the proposals before us?
Yep, sure. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, the report before you is the capital programme, or the prioritised list of capital works for this coming financial year. As members are aware, we've kind of gone through it at our monthly meetings, and at the moment I think our budget hasn't been set, but we're working on the expectation it'll be in the similar order as the year we've just had. So the list there, what I would say, a caveat is saying it was put together in January, approximately a month ago. And as you're all aware, we do have winter still going on, and last year was a classic example of how the winter can impact our roads and change our priorities. And I feel we worked really well last year at revisiting those priorities, even though they'd been set in April. So this year it's on the same principle. At the moment, this was a snapshot of our priorities taken in January. We're already identifying some things that might creep up the list and change down, but there's an opportunity to members to take a view of those priorities, see if there's any they completely disagree with or have challenges. But I would also remind members that they have 100,000 ward allocation for each ward, and there may be something that's not on the list. There's something they may wish to bring forward, but also I'm very mindful that historically we focused on the running road surface, the carriageway as it were, and footpaths haven't been listed or brought forward at the because they were done at the expense of keeping the roads essentially pothole free. So members also have the opportunity with their ward allocation to identify footpaths. More than happy to have these discussions at the monthly meetings, but I would like possibly today, if the members would agree, how they wish to spend their ward allocation. If you recall, last year you were happy for it to go into the big melting pot and it just be allocated and done according to the priorities that we had agreed. So that's where we are. I haven't given you a red line at the moment. We are still looking at the amount of surfacing that we are going to do to try and save the roads that we can before they deteriorate any further, but also be mindful of the condition of the roads that actually need surfacing and the bigger amount of money spent on them. So that's where we are. I'll take any questions.
Thanks very much, members. And for those who don't know who Colin Howell is, he's the head of service, and Josie is our roads operations manager. Members, does anybody have any particular questions or comments or observations based on this report? And I cannot believe that there's not a hand up. Thank you, Councillor Rosie.
Yeah, thank you, Raymond. I've got to admit, I was hoping to see other hands from members. I think we've got more questions to ask of ourselves as members rather than asking officers here. Both the presentations from Colin and Josie were perfectly clear, but look, I've been really disappointed how the topic on roads is played out in the public. I'm going to be straightforward in talking here. I think there's been a great deal of political nonsense around the whole thing. When I think back to being elected first in 2017, and it was interesting to read, I deliberately read minutes from Caithness era committees from 2015, 2016 yesterday, just to understand where we were. And it should have been abundantly clear to us, you know, what a position was. But when it, you know, it was we to put it in simple and crude terms, for the first 2 years of our tenure, we just mucked about. We waited and waited and waited, and there was a refusal to engage with the officers, as we have done over the past 3 years. And I think it's plainly obvious for each member to see transformation and relationship that we've had with officers, and we're careful in what we do. We don't stray into, or we don't deliberately stray into operational things, but key thing is that we got to a point where we understood what officers, what their issues were, what their challenges were, you know, what type of investments they would like, all of these things, which now I think we can see, you know, on a regular basis, we see improvements in roads across Caithness. So and the other point to make is it's quite a complex topic. When I think how, and I'm not professing to be an expert yet, but my own knowledge has improved beyond recognition. But it's the understanding of you know, what revenue and capital investment means, and it really is quite complex to understand at times, you know. But I think it's really important. And Colin, you mentioned Redesign Board. It was absolutely the right thing to do when that decision was taken. So we understand how we're spending money and where it's spent, you know, and what means we take to do that. So finally, I think on Josie's point about footpaths, I absolutely agree. We've had a great deal of focus on road users, but we've got to remember that, you know, pedestrians obviously use footpaths. And indeed, on papers for today's committee, we've got further investment for active travel. So it makes absolute sense to think about footpaths. So I'm going to wait. I'm conscious that you said something already, Chair, about coming back in, but I think it's important to hear views of other members on this topic, and maybe you'll grant me to come back in later on. So thank you very much.
I think that members, if members all took the view of waiting to hear what the other person said, we'd have nobody coming in at all. And I think that you would expect me to say that, Councillor Rosie. I'll see about letting you in later on. Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there was a seminar recently in Highland Council on roads, and I was looking forward to this. It was really, really good. I was getting geared up for it. A huge seminar on roads, but it turned out the Chair says we're only going to talk about capital here. not roads, but capital. So I was a bit deflated, but it was very interesting indeed. Very interesting indeed of what the seminar revealed. But no, I'm just commenting on the work that Colin and John are doing here, and I welcome this report. And the 21 million is really, really good. I know it'll go a fair amount of way, maybe not as much as we would like, but it's going to go a long way. Now, I'm a great supporter of the roads here in Caithness, and I always have been, and I will continue to be so. And I do like the way Colin and John have prioritised the programme, and it's the only way forward. And as I said, I'm a high mileage driver here in Caithness, and I have been for a number of years, and I get people stopping me every day, complaining. And what my answer to them all is, look, drive according to the road conditions. And I point to my own van. I say, look, see that van of mine? It does 30,000 miles a year across Caithness. I went through the MOT without one broken spring. So don't come to me. So I'm a great supporter of the roads, Chair, and I always will be. So thank you, Colin and John, for your report. Very interesting indeed.
Thank you, Willie. Are there any other members who wish to make any contributions or ask questions of the officers? If not, I am going to make some observations myself. I hope you don't mind. I will not stand in front of Councillor Rees if he wants to speak.
Sorry. Thank you, Raymond. Thank you, Josie. Thank you, Colin. A couple of questions. One is a detail, one's a general point. On the list of road repairs, number 40 is the Rumpster Road. It's not a huge sum of money. It's 19.8 thousand, which is not a large amount. I just want to ask, and we've been here before with the wind farm that is now going to be built at Galtaclay on that road. And I am, like Carl said, I'm not a road engineer either, but is there any point in doing new surface stressing on the road if, and it isn't if it's going to get chewed up by the heavy goods vehicles constructing the wind farm? That's just a detail point. My second question is a much more general one, Josie, and sort of slightly, or Colin, slightly putting you on the spot. If we look at the council's own figures, the spend for this year that's coming to an end and the spend for next year is around about 21 million. But if we refer back to the medium-term financial plan that was passed by the council in December and could be changed by the new administration this summer, that is proposing the road spend drops to about 8.2 million, if I remember correctly. I haven't got the figure in front of me, but I wanted to ask Josie your kind of professional opinion on what we will do if there was a reduction of that kind of extent in the finance available to you. And thirdly, just to finish off, going back to what Councillor Rosie was saying, I suppose we have to nail our colours to the mast here. Out of the 100k, if nobody else is going to suggest anything, the 100k per ward, I would have thought, could we put 50k towards footpaths and pavements in our ward? Just, I'm quite relaxed about the figure, but if you're looking for guidance or an ask, Colin, Josie, that would be an initial suggestion from myself. And finally, as always, looking out the windows, the snow's battering down here at Thurso right now. Thanks very much, as always, to all the roads crews for the work they're doing summer, autumn, spring and winter. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Councillor Rees. There are no other hands up. I hope you don't mind me making a contribution before I invite either Colin and Josie to come back in. First of all, Colin, can you just confirm for me the total spend, capital and revenue between all the investments that the council has made in this current financial year? I believe it has increased to the amount of around about 35 million. That's revenue, capital, and also the extra capital funding that we agreed. Secondly, I'd like to follow up on what Matthew said there just now. I really think that given the fact that we know what the challenges are in front of us here in Caithness, but they're not just in Caithness, they are all over the Highlands. Let's be quite clear about that. If we have got a challenge here in Caithness to be able to recover our roads position from historic underspend, And I'm not going to use this meeting to apportion blame. We know that there has been an underinvestment. What has to happen is that the current councillors have to find ways of mitigating that. One of the ways of mitigating that was to make sure that all the money that was allocated to the Caithness roads and across the Highlands was spent this year. And for my understanding, the amount of money that was and the increased amounts of money that was given to Josie and the team has been spent. They've spent that with no real addition in the revenue. It was all additional capital, and that meant that Josie's team still had to spend the increased amount of capital with the same resource that they were given. So hats off, as Councillor Rees said there just now. Hats off to the teams, because it's not easy to be able to deal with that. And I think that Council, through the Redesign Board, has to identify how do we get the balance correct in terms of capital and revenue. Colin, I'd like to thank you very much for the fact that when we had the Redesign Board recently, you gave an overview. I requested it, and you gave an overview to make sure that members have the understanding between revenue and capital and the relationship between the two. I know that yesterday at the monthly roads meeting, we were given there was a heads up that maybe not all members were at that, just due to other conflicting, diary events. I'd like us to make sure that opportunity is given again. I can't overstate the importance I think that there is with members having understanding the difference and the correlation between revenue and capital. Willie, I heard what you said earlier on, and I appreciate what you said. It was about the seminar on the capital only, and I remember that. And but maybe what we can do is ensure that we open up the Redesign Board conversation. Colin, I know that you're there, and Josie's on the Redesign Board. I'm the Vice Chair of that, and it's very much in our focus. Invite all the members to the Redesign Board for the engineering review, and to get the whole broad picture of views from members from all over the Highland Council area, and in particular as far as hopefully, Willie, the next one's on the 18th of February, Willie. If you're interested, that's where it'll be more than capital that's been discussed there. It's the whole operation that's been discussed there. In terms of the 100k, I'd like to suggest to Colin and Josie that we actually take that to a ward business meeting and or the monthly roads meetings, so that we can get a view from other members. I heard Councillors Rees, Rosie mention that. I think that we need to drill down into the views of others and see how we can best spend that 100,000. Matthew will already be thinking that Councillor Bremner here is looking to take all the 200,000 and spend it in Ward 3, as if he would. And in terms of the capital programme that's in front of us, there's been some suggestions, both at this meeting and at other meetings, in terms of how we could review that list, and I'm sure that that's still quite a fluid position. Josie, you're open to having that discussed further before conclusion. I heard Councillor Rees making a suggestion there. Lastly, Josie, I wouldn't mind if you would like to let everybody know what happens when you receive thousands and thousands of photographs of potholes. I think that you must have one of the biggest collections. What happens with that? How do we acknowledge the issues that the public have? What do we do with that information? I think it's important that when folks are letting the council know, and the members here, because we flood you with all these ideas as well, what do we do with it? How do we manage to let them know that there is a process that sometime we are looking to programme attendance for the issues that they're raising for us, but there must be some sort of prioritisation, and I think we need to raise the profile of that prioritising. So a few comments there from myself, but I'll go to Colin first, and then Joseph, if you just follow up after that, I'd really appreciate that.
Thank you, Chair. I'll go through the order in which members raised it. Councillor Rosie identified the relationship that you members have with the Rose team in Caithness. I attended, as you're aware, the monthly meeting yesterday, and that is a very positive location where all the issues can be discussed openly and well, and it's very productive in terms of that relationship between members and the roads team. So there's an understanding of priorities and issues going forward. So that was really good, and not surprisingly, Councillor Rosie, is that we want to make sure, and the redesign process is through that education of both our members and our public, and the communication issues between our members and our public about the opportunities that we've got and the challenges we've got. We need to make sure that we get that communication, the dialogue right. So I'm pleased to hear that the relationships are good. That's what I witnessed when I attended yesterday. In terms of Councillor Mackay's issues, I mean, this paper before you, Councillor Mackay, is clearly a capital paper, which is why we are discussing it. And it is just to give you that reassurance that that interrelationship between capital and revenue is well understood and is absolutely pivotal to the work that we're doing as a review of the service and the redesign process. And I would say, Chair, that I am very keen to make sure that the information that has been provided through the redesign workshops is available to members, and I'm happy to take through any member who wishes, either on an individual basis or as a group basis, that information, because there's some good stuff in terms of the context of the work that we're doing and also the opportunities that we've got going forward. So I would welcome the opportunity to provide that information to members if they've not had the opportunity to attend the workshops, because I know there's conflicting issues. In terms of Councillor Rees, I'd probably mention, Councillor Rees, that the issues over wind farms, we do have a process through the planning process to make sure that we mitigate any impacts that any development may have. We're also working on a strategy across Pan Highland, because we've had strategies elsewhere in Highland that have seen real benefits, that have benefited the road network through working with those wind farm and wind farm developers, and we will certainly be engaging with those wind farm developers to ensure that there is no deterioration of the road as associated with the development, but also see whether that investment gives us the opportunity to further mitigate that road going forward. So we will be engaging with them through our transport planning colleagues through the planning process. So that's to say. In terms of, I'm going to comment on Councillor Bremner's comment first before I come back to Councillor Rees and the ongoing capital programme. Appendix 1 in your paper, members, identifies both the revenue situation and the capital situation we have before us. So you will see that as roads, we get a revenue allocation every year, and we get a capital allocation every year. What you see in Appendix 1 is a very significant increase of £10 million per year for 2 financial years, and that was augmented by the health and prosperity funds. So additional funds that you as members allocated to roads from historic underspends from last financial year. And you will see that total investment across roads across the Highlands in terms of revenue and capital is in the order of £31.5 million. And the challenge that I have, and the challenge that all the roads operational managers have, is making sure that we spend that money wisely, understanding that it's the workforce that deliver roads, winter maintenance, capital deliveries, flood responses, drainage issues, and we need to make sure we balance all those requirements and deliver the service as best we can. And that's what we are hoping to work through. And I would also, thank the efforts that the roads teams and the squads have gone through, because they've done a good job. And I do appreciate members' appreciation of the work that they are doing. Thank you, Chair. And Josie, if you can answer the question about prioritising of potholes, I think that's a very good question, because probably members, I mean, I've been head of roads now since September, and I am bombarded with photographs of potholes. And we do have a process by which we manage to include that information within our WDM system, our capturing our system, prioritisation and doing the works. And I think Josie would probably reiterate that is the mechanism by which we really would appreciate that information coming through. So we get consistency of data coming in and we capture that data. But I'll let Josie, because she's much more close to the issues than I am.
Okay, before I go into the potholes, I just want to touch on the surface dressing where a wind farm is. We yes, there's the engagement with the developer, but also we're mindful of having the knowledge of where these actions will be taking place. And it could be, we had an instance in Sutherland this year where they wanted to upgrade the fibre optic along the whole stretch of the north coast, and we've delayed the surface dressing until that work has been completed. So we will take decisions in the background of whether we actually proceed with something based on what we know is happening, a development or other activity on that road. So whilst it's listed there, it might not actually happen this year if we know something else is going on. So there are these decisions. I would also touch on the monies that we had, as Colin mentioned in Appendix 1, you can see the amount of money we've had there. Just for information for members, we've literally spent our the 1.5 capital allocation that we had, the majority of it being by our in-house squads. We did let out a small amount to contractors for surfacing, but that was because winter was fast approaching. But we started the work last March. We completed three schemes in early March. We then went on to do the 15 surfacing and 17 surface dressing schemes we identified at last year's capital. But in addition to that, in discussion with members, we had 5 additional schemes that were listed on there. And more recently, there are 7 other locations based on engineering judgment we've carried out surfacing work. So all in all, we've had a huge investment on the Caithness roads. I was looking back at figures, and prior to the lockdown, our capital budget was £500,000. So we've had 3 times that spent, which has been a huge input, but it has meant that, you know, we've managed to juggle our capital and our revenue works, and the guys now are out doing a lot of the revenue works, the routine maintenance. We don't have anything left in the pot for capital for the big schemes. Hopefully that'll start in the spring again, but just some background on it that we have managed to deliver in Caithness, which I'm absolutely delighted with, and as I say, the majority of it by our in-house squads. So fair play to the guys, as you say, brilliant. Potholes, yes, I have hundreds of photographs, not just from the public, from my own officers out and about. The guys out gritting report potholes, who report it to their foreman, who then report it to the roads officer, and I have hundreds of photographs. Routinely, we have a roads inspector whose obligation is to inspect our roads according to our hierarchy. So some are quarterly, some are monthly, and some are annually. It depends on the what the road classification has been. They undergo training where they risk assess a pothole. Now that sounds a bit loose, but that's the code of conduct for well-maintained highways. Is how you do it. You risk assess your pothole and then you categorise it for repair. The public don't have, unfortunately, that knowledge or maybe that understanding that the potholes are categorised and then we attend to them within the time frame. So some are urgent. 3 days is generally our remit. Sometimes it can be 7 days, 14, 28, or it can be planned works. Quite often, though, the potholes being reported to us, we're already aware of because the guys are out on the road letting it know. And sometimes we'll get a pothole being reported and we've programmed it for a fortnight's time. We just cannot be everywhere at once. And so so there is that impact where our inspector picks up on them, but the public stuff, the public reporting goes through the correct portal, either by phoning the number on the website or calling in a service centre. That gets logged onto our customer communication portal and gets managed and logged, and then there's a trail, because as you appreciate, in the background of all this is the countless FOIs for information, but also for us for reporting for insurance claims or third party claims on the roads as well. So there is a balance between what we get reported and the public perceive as urgent, but also what we have assessed and risk assessed, and whether and programming it to be reported. I don't think there's a perfect process. I don't quite know how I mean, this is maybe something for a conversation behind the scenes with Colin, but our public communications case viewer system doesn't actually speak to our asset management system. So there is a little bit of joined up work to be done there by officers out in the ground. But generally, we've got officers out there who are already aware of the potholes and maybe already have it planned. I think the challenge is the public understanding that we won't necessarily get back to them every single pothole report. It's just too vast a volume for us to communicate, thank you, we're going to do it, it's programmed at this time. We're just out there trying to do the best we can and get to as many as possible. And if you put a resource into chasing up every single pothole and responding back, that's a resource that could be better deployed elsewhere on programming for the future. So it's not ideal, but I think the expectation of the public is that they will have somebody come back to them and say, yes, your one will be fixed, and when is maybe not an expectation we should be putting out there. But I do appreciate that through our monthly meetings, the information of what we're programming and where we're expecting to be going back into the community councils, that then goes back into the community, has made a huge difference to the volume of information going in both ways. But we do take every report seriously, we'll follow it up, but we just don't always have the resource to respond to every individual report on that one.
Thank you, Josie, for that. I'm going to allow members to come back in on this one. It's an important issue. Councillor Mackay.
Getting away from potholes, thank you for allowing me to come back in, Chair. I have noticed in my diary that on the 25th of February, we're all invited to a seminar on transport and wind farms. Now, Councillor Rees brought up the approved Gulticloy wind farm in Leibster, quite rightly so, because the community benefit there is going to be absolutely huge to that parish. But what this discussions on the 25th of February taking place is going to involve how we can attract or force wind farms to help strategic responsibilities that Highland Council have. Example, roads. Right now, none of them are interested in giving us any money whatsoever unless they damage a road. They just tell us it's not our responsibility. But Chair, just to say, members, that this is a very important meeting and how we as Highland Council can persuade these wind farms, because the community benefit here is massive in Caithness. And I think some of it should be spent on that strategic responsibilities that we have on our roads, because they'll never spend all the money we've got here. So let's see if we can do something on the 25th of February. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that really well made point there, Willie. I think that would also be a fantastically well received point at the redesign board discussion as well. Councillor Carl Rosie.
Yeah, I'm going to be very brief, Raymond. Look, I welcome the suggestions that you made on how we progress and make our decisions with money is available. But I think it's really important this debate is taking place. I think it's been balanced. I think a crucial thing is to, Josie's points about public understanding. It's just unfortunate. I think our reach from this meeting is limited, but we've maybe got opportunity to include Colin and Josie at future association or community council meetings as an example to broaden the understanding. I think that'd be welcomed in the community. So thank you very much. That's me finished.
Thank you. There are no other. I do beg your pardon, Councillor Rees. By crikey, you guys. And I'm sure Jill will use the opportunity to get to.
Sorry, I lost what you say, but anyway, thank you. I think I could say thank you for whatever you did say.
To get your hand up, and just as I'm about to conclude or give a final observation, I then give way, and you're all doing it to me. I think you're just testing me as a chair in my first full day.
You remind me of a benevolent school teacher. I think you're chairing your unruly crew very well. Briefly, what Willie was saying, I totally support what Willie's just said, but you will not be surprised, I would go a little bit further and say, simply for the sake of saying it, I really do think that not just wind farms, but any major engineering projects, it should be built into the planning system, something concrete, no pun intended, that the roads are repaired once the development is finished. Ideally, talking of community benefit, to a better standard than they were before, but certainly thinking, and I'm sorry, it's Ward 3 again, but the Mibster to Westerdale Road, that suffered really, really badly, but it was widened by the developer, so work can be done, and well done to Josie, or it might have been her predecessor, that the road there at Achlacan was widened to take the heavy goods vehicle. I was earlier on, I didn't risk it, but the Lochmore Road is the single biggest project on this list. It's number 51, over £250,000 to fix it, but that is a classic example of the difficulties that Josie and Colin face. A very remote minor road with timber traffic on it, but it's a road that could swallow up literally a lot of money, and I'm saying that in sympathy. And I've just done a quick bit of maths because Josie said she hadn't yet worked out a red line. There were 141 roads projects in the appendix for this time last year, and I think, and I just did this right now when Josie was talking, I think we achieved 47 of the projects that were on the list. And that actually works out at exactly 1/3 of 141 by my O-level maths. And I think to have got all that done, it's a lot more, as Josie said, than we've ever managed before. But I do ask again, if the medium-term financial plan, if those figures are adhered to, it's obvious that number would drop. And I don't know what we do about it, but Josie is in a better place to comment than I am. But I certainly, going back to the Rumpster Road, it would be fantastic to get the road improved as an actual community benefit. Thank you very much, Chair, for letting me back in again as well.
Thanks very much, Matthew. If you don't mind me making an observation on something that you said there just now, I would comment on the fact that, yeah, it's good to see that we actually get all the information reported to us in terms of the road survey. I've noticed that it's other area committees, they get what is actually planned and that's it. Here, we see the whole programme and we should be thankful for that. So well noticed, well commented on. But what I would also say is, and maybe the officers might want to comment on this, we see all those roads so that we can then strategically plan. All those roads that are in that that the officers survey, as far as I'm aware, do not all need attended right now. And that's what's good and beneficial about what we can see in terms of a longer plan. Maybe I could get the Josie, maybe if you could come in and comment on that when I come back to you in a second. But I'm going to go to Councillor Tilt first. Thank you.
Yeah, just a small thing really. The roads in the area were built to maintain smaller vehicles, lighter vehicles, and we've got some really heavy trucks going up and down these roads full of quarried vehicle stuff, and the roads are collapsing because of that. And I do feel that the companies that own these vehicles should put something back into. I know they get charged so much, but I think that they should have to pay a little bit more to utilize all these facilities, because it's, the drains are collapsing underneath the roads, and that's a lot of work for the roads people to put right.
Thanks for your comment, Jill. I'm going to go back to the officers. I'm going to start with Colin, and I'm going to ask him once more. He reiterated the figure of 31 million. I have it that it's 14.2 revenue, 7.2 capital, 10 extra capital, and the health and prosperity is 4 million. That to me is 35.4 million, not 31. And the 31 million was previously reported to us before the health and prosperity money. And it's really important because I like headlines that tell us that we've thrown another 4 million onto something that's such a big problem, because Scott, I think that you're here and welcome to the meeting, but we need to get that banner headline right. I think it could possibly just be a simple non-updating of the, and I wish we had actually seen this and caught this before we were actually at this meeting. We could have actually corrected that. Colin, would you care to comment?
Chair,
Or
Chair,
am I very thick and just not quite seeing that 4 million is absorbed somewhere else in the figure too?
No, Chair, you're entirely correct. That the total revenue and capital funding is 35.4 million pounds, and you're quite right. The error is that that element hasn't been updated to take account of the additional Health and Prosperity Fund allocation that was made. So thank you, Chair, for pointing that out. Unfortunately, I've replicated that in every single area committee paper, so you've given me the opportunity to correct it going forward. So thank you for that. Your maths is impeccable, and mine is poor.
There'll be some welcome news for other committees as well then.
It will indeed, Chair.
Thank you. It's certainly very welcome for Caithness. Josie, would you like to comment on any of the points that have been made?
Yeah, I'll go in reverse. I'll go to Councillor Tilt's observation about our roads. A lot of the single track roads around the counties and indeed in the Highlands have not been constructed in terms of current design standards and proper construction materials. A lot of them were tracks that over the years have just had a layer of tar and a layer of tar, and as you're right, as vehicles have gotten not just heavier but wider, you know, that has had an impact on it. And I know, I mean, roads, generally a single track road we're looking at is 3.3 metres wide. We've got some in some areas at 2.7. Now, you know, do the math. I won't ask Colin to do the math. But, you know, that is, you're right. We are dealing with legacy roads, whatever you want to call them, but they aren't constructed to modern design standards. So we do have that challenge with drainage and everything else ongoing. I will touch on the wind farms and the other big developments. We do engage with the developers. We do try to ensure that we get the best we can for our road network, and we protect it as much as we can and engage with them at a very, oh look, what he's putting his hand up. Oh, he's going on to his next committee. But what I would say is that one of our biggest challenges in Caithness, and it's something I've not got an issue with in Sutherland, is the location of the quarries. And at the early development stage, the developers don't often know who's going to actually be running and doing the construction. So trying to pin down where the haulage lorries are running to and from, or which network of part of the network they're going to use, is the biggest challenge for us. And it's something that myself and my senior engineer, Jonathan, we work pretty diligently on trying to pin this down, to try and capture it and to try and reduce that risk and limit the flow. But if you've got a quarry serving not just one development, two developments, it is a challenge, and it's something that I would dearly love to see. But it's the quarry operator as well needs to engage, or the haulage company needs to engage, and that's sort of almost too far down the pecking order at the level we're having those discussions. But it is something we're working away on. We're very mindful of the damage, you know, these vehicles cause. So that's one thing. The programme, the exhaustive list, it's not exhaustive. That list of schemes there is very similar to last year's length, as in it represents about 12% of the overall network of roads. And as I said, it was a snapshot in January. We haven't managed to get around every single road, and already we've got a handful of other locations that we're going to bring to the monthly meetings. And you're quite right, Councillor Rees, that, you know, or Councillor Bremner, some of the schemes that are identified down the lower end, we've maybe identified as okay for surface dressing. But by the time we get round to them, or, you know, in a couple of years' time, they might have deteriorated to a point where it's surfacing that requires. There is a balance to be struck, and this is what we think these roads need this year. They might need something else next year, or there might be some roads that, I mean, and as everybody experienced, we look at them now, and 2 weeks later, after a bout of frost, freeze thaw process, they've all of a sudden crept to the top of the list where they weren't even already on it, you know, a month ago. So it's a snapshot of mid-January. It's a very dynamic list, as you're all aware, and priorities can change over a stormy weekend. You know, in all cases. So yes, it is a snapshot of where we are just now. And as you say, we keep trying to change it, keep moving it about, trying to deliver the best we can to keep the roads going as much as we can.
Thanks for that, Josie. I think members have really appreciated your contributions today. If you could take from me and advise Colin on the offer that he said in terms of an individual basis or a group basis. I know that the ward manager is listening today. I would very much like to ask members if we would invite Colin and we'll take him up on that offer. I think it would be really beneficial for Caithness members to have that that kind of one-to-one in terms of the difference between revenue and capital and the relationship there. Possibly also the ability, you know, what options are lying before us in terms of sourcing funding and all that kind of stuff that's good to get into the guts of. If you could do that for us, Josie, I'd really appreciate that. Other than that, well, thank you very much for your attendance today. And members, the recommendations are as detailed in your report. Can I have your agreement to those recommendations? Nodding of heads all round. Thank you very much. Thanks very much, Josie. Take care. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Members, we're moving on to item number 6 in the agenda. I am minded to have a short comfort break after this item. Seb, I think that we are going to be coming to you for, well, I think there's, I think is it yourself that we're coming to for this item?
I'm here too.
Hello. Oh, listen, I can't see you. I can't see you on my screen. I can see you on the screen now. Okay, I take it, Alison, that you're going to be speaking to this report first.
Yes, very briefly, Seb has more detail to give. Yeah.
Thanks very much. Over to yourself and Seb. Okay,
thank you, Chair, and good morning, councillors. Yes, you have the report that was sent out to you, and as I said a moment ago, Seb will give you more detail on the data that's given there. In particular things, for instance, the positive destinations, the percentage in Wick High is sitting there higher than Scotland and Highland, and the same can be said for the exclusion rates in Wick High at the moment. So it would be interesting to hear what he's going to say about that and how they're managing to keep these exclusion rates low. When I was looking through the data, I thought you would have picked up on the NOS exclusion rates, however. It said 27.8 in every 1,000 compared to Highland, which was 4.7, or Scotland 8. So that was obviously a troubling number, which I had a look into. And when speaking to the head teacher, we were able to understand that this was 4 particular children last year, one who is now in Wick High. These children all had social emotional behaviour issues where the unprovoked violence, etc., against other children or staff, and it meant that they were excluded. However, there was a programme of support put in place for these young people, and the 3 pupils who are still in NOS, they have had no exclusions. In fact, they have, and neither has any other child actually in the whole of the Wick ASG being excluded this session so far. And what they did is they put in place their learning is now in small supportive setting with a nurturing theme. They've got access to breakfast club, etc. And they have shortened timetables, and this seems to be benefiting them and the whole ethos within the school. So I just wanted to point out that one particular piece of data which was quite concerning. But I will now go over to Seb, who'll be able to give you more detail on the rest. Thank you.
Good morning, councillors. Good morning, Chair. I'll start a little bit with COVID update. Last time we met, I believe I was speaking all about COVID, as that was a different picture. But I'll go back to the report just briefly to let you know where we are in terms of COVID and how it affects our school. So although, as I said, last year we were going through this time of the year, we're going through online learning, remote learning. It's different this time, although we're going through a higher number of positive cases for pupils and staff, which just causes disruption to us. But the school, we managed to remain open. We weren't put in a situation when we needed to close the school for any year group or classes. and hopefully that will stay in place. We've got our risk assessment and mitigation in place for that, and they are such as increased hand sanitization. Every time when pupils enter the building or the classroom, or staff and the visitors, we sanitize hands. We, as you would be aware, we wear face coverings all the time in and outside classrooms. We clean the hard surfaces between classes, desks and chairs in between groups when they enter. We try to keep the one-way traffic system, maintain physical social distancing, still keeping senior school and junior school separately. So we've got different social times for those groups. And it seems to be, as I said, quite effective mitigations for us that we managed to stay open going through a high number of cases. Nonetheless, as I said, I'll not be speaking much about the COVID situations. I'll go back to the report that we've had, and I'll unravel a few numbers that I've picked from the report, give you a little bit of a story, what's behind those numbers, and then I'll be open to questions if you have any at the end. The first thing I would like to start is the school information data that we've got and the staffing. And just to point out here that we are constantly under pressure and find it difficult to recruit staff. And that's historically for Caithness, for us, for high school, been a difficulty. And we are heavily relying on an agency staff, on a time plan agency for recruitment. And just to give you an example, this term, we had 3 vacancies, 2 in maths and 1 in English, which you can agree that they are the most important subjects. Some would think that we couldn't fill. We couldn't, albeit we had them advertised a few times. We had no applicants, and we were unable to recruit through the usual channels of recruitment. And then we've managed to cover internally, we've managed to cover through the agency staff, but it is constant pressure for us, the recruitment of staff, and that is having an impact on the delivery of the curriculum structure, or on the pupils' choices. And every year we struggle with that aspect for Caithness. Moving on, in the report, I'll talk a little bit about the ASN. The next part of the report that you will see is the ASN data, number of pupils, and the building. And what I would like to highlight here, that number that you'll see on the report, at 94 pupils at level 3 and 32 at level 4, that is for the whole SCG. However, for us, it's more than 50% of those pupils are within Wake High School. All pupils within Wake High School, we've got over 40% who are level 1 to 4 ASN level, and that is higher than Highland average. So that makes 39.5% for our school roll, and the average for Highland is 36%. And 6 to 7 of those pupils, as I said, are level 3 and 4, and that is putting a lot of difficulty for us as well, and a lot of stress. And why I'm mentioning that in context of the building is because in the report you will see that the suitability and the condition of the building is listed as an A. However, in terms when it comes to the provision for the ASN department, it's not suitable to the level A. We do have pupils whose needs are not met because of the fabric of the building, because of the lack of specialized space, because of the lack of separate entrance to the department. And we do have pupils who are missing out of opportunities to education, or not all their needs are being met. We are lacking of space such as a multi-sensory room. We are lacking space such as autism-friendly room. We are lacking a separate entrance to allow pupils who struggle to go through the busy corridor, busy entrance through the front car park to access the building. So that is a concern that I'm putting in the context of the building being listed in the report as an A, and the aspect of the ASN. Other element that I would like to highlight here in terms of the building itself is the capacity. In the report you will see that the capacity is listed as an 89%. Our school capacity is 760 pupils. And next year in August 2022, we are anticipating that we will have 756 pupils, which means that we will reach 99% of the capacity of the building. and we are just 4 pupils short of the full capacity. But looking at the forecast in a few years ahead, in 2 years' time, we are reaching nearly 800 pupils. That means that we are exceeding the capacity by 35, 40 pupils, if the forecast is to be. And I've looked closely at the Highland forecast. I've linked with the primary head teachers to see how many pupils we do have in each year group in the catchment primary schools, and that forecast seems to be very accurate. So it does look that in the next few years, our school building will not be big enough for the number of pupils that we are facing to have, which, as you can imagine, will have a massive difficulty for us. And back to staff. What we will find, and you would be probably aware as well, that this staffing formula has been increased, which allow us, and we welcome that news, allows us to employ another 2 teachers for next year. But having more pupils at the same time means having more teachers. Having more teachers on top of that with the increased staffing formula will mean in a few years' time we'll have no spaces for those teachers and those pupils to be taught in. And this is a massive concern. So although, as I say, I'm putting that on the table here, as it is listed as a suitability and condition in A, but that could be a little bit of a misleading information in terms what sort of difficulties we are facing currently and what sort of difficulties we will be facing in the next few years. And I'm not talking, as I said, as I mentioned, I'm not talking about 10 years forecast, but 2-3 years forecast when we are overreaching the capacity of the building. Okay, next thing that I've got to discuss here is the pupil information. And as Alison already mentioned, the first thing I'll pick up here is the attendance data. And as you can see, the attendance data for our pupils is very much in line with Highland and National. It's just sitting below 89%. And we anticipate that that will be the case in a few years' time. However, just to give you a little bit of an insight of that data for us and that data for the Highland and National will go down. We've already noticed, due to COVID being the factor, that the attendance is not sitting as high as 89%, and that is a challenge that we struggle with, as that will have, again, as other factors impact on the attainment, on the well-being, and all other aspects. But again, speaking to other head teachers in Highland, it will go in line. It's not just Wake that they struggle with the attendance. It seems to be a national and local issue that the attendance in the schools has dropped drastically. And it's hard for me to predict what the report will look like in 2 years' time, but I think it will be closer to 83 or 85% rather than 89. But looking into this, the positive picture from that section of the report would be the exclusions, as you can see, is half the level of the exclusions that we see in Highland. It's 1/4 of the exclusion that we see nationally, and we need to take that as recognize that as a credit, and I believe this is a credit to the pupils, as a credit to parents and the staff in the high school, as the guidance team and the partners that work along with within the high school. And this is the youth work team, the family link workers, this is the counselling staff. We went through the review with Caithness course of the PSE curriculum, and all those elements will have a small factor on the number of exclusion. And as I said, that information, to take the perspective of the positive case of the exclusions being half, we need to look through the perspective of the catchment area of our group, considering the size of the school, having a high school, as you know, the demographics, the level of deprivations within our catchment, looking at the number of percentage of pupils being eligible for free school meals being 60%, as you can see in the report, a lot higher to what we go through in Highland, which is 11%, linking with the police report that you've heard earlier on, going through the number of antisocial behavior in town. That I think that we are managing to keep the ethos in the school, managing to keep the exclusion low. And I can tell you that the forecast is improving in that area as well is a very positive aspect and reflection to the ethos within the school. Other aspect that I've got to discuss here, again, I'd like to recognize that as a positive and good news is the positive destinations. Yet again, we are sitting within 94%, which is very high, and you can see an improvement in there from 2018 from 92%, and it is higher than Scotland and higher than Highland. And I can tell you that even within that number, that 5.2% that is represented as not in that positive destination, there are 6 pupils that got their individual stories, that there's story behind those pupils. And I can tell you that 5 of those 6 pupils have left school with a positive destination. They haven't maintained that destination within the next 3 months after leaving school. And that is how it's reported. However, that number is even more positive if we're looking kind of for the part since they left school, what has happened there. And then we've got very little, as you can imagine, when people leave us, our role and in the input of what happens is then very limited. However, that number is looking good. And what I'd like to highlight with that number as well is the destination where our pupils go. And you can see in the report that we have shifted, and part of that would be the shift down through the school, part of that would be through the kind of circumstances maybe in town. But we've shifted pupils from employment to higher education. Now we've got in the report, we can see we've got 33.6% of our pupils taking a higher education as a destination after leaving with high school, which is an increase from where we were before, 26% or 24 even 2 years back from the report. And we are moving closer to the average of Highland and Scotland in that area. Further education is another element that more people has come in. It's an increase by nearly 10% from the previous years, and it's overseeing Highland and Scotland. So that is a positive picture that we can recognize that pupils are not only reaching a positive destination, leaving the school, but they're going further to training and further education. And again, the credit will have to go to pupils, to staff, partners in particular who work within the school, like Skill Development Scotland, career advisors, developing youth work staff that we were talking about starting to employ last time we had a discussion about this, and it is having a positive effect. So we are very pleased to see those figures remain high. And that would be me, and I'm open to questions.
Thank you very much, Seb, and thanks very much, Alison. Members, are there any questions or queries or comments on this report? Well, okay, so we have a Ward 2 councillor who's going to comment on the WIC KSG. Councillor Rosie.
It's I hope it's taken as a very constructive suggestion or proposal. Look, I'm conscious that Sebastian mentioned recruitment difficulties. Now, you know, in any forum when you go or visit as a councillor, be it NHS Highland or Highland Council itself, we hear these difficulties. I'm just thinking about the rest of today's papers where we've got finance available to possibly address this issue, because I think we need to do something. We've got a huge amount of positive to attract people to come to Caithness and stay in Caithness. So I guess the question is, how do we think about that and who do we need to involve? But I really do think we should put some urgency on it, because, you know, Sebastian's points were more than clear. So I'm seeing your eyes widening there, Raymond. But look, I mean, we could include each of these agencies along with HIE or something. But you know, is it a case of doing some? I see advertisement from other local authorities on TV nowadays. So you know, but we can't ignore it. We need to do something about it.
Thanks very much. Does anybody want to make a comment on that, Alison? Or Sebastian, actually, Carol, addressed that direct.
Yeah, maybe Seb would like to, yeah. I was going to mention something about the building after, but yeah.
Yeah,
I have questions, believe me. There may not be others that have got questions, but I have a ton of them, Alison. So have your pen ready.
Just to comment to Councillor Rosie, yeah, we would welcome any help that could raise the profile of recruitment for us. If anything that could advertise better, maybe highlight in the different channels. I don't know. I don't have the answer. What would be the best way to help with that? But any even discussion around what could be done, you know, would be much welcome. And if there's any outcomes out of that discussion, we'd be very happy to see, because that is a concern. And we are, as I say, looking to recruit more staff due to the increased school roll and due to the increased staffing formula, but we are finding that as a challenge.
Thanks very much for that, Seb. I'll bring Councillor Tilt in before I speak to myself, Alison.
Thank you, Sebastian, for that really good report. That's very detailed. Just a slight problem that we've had this week. I've had mums on the phone asking about the heating in the high school. I gather there's a problem. Is that a recurring problem? Is that a problem that's now been solved?
We had two. You'll be aware that we had two problems in terms of a building. We had the storm damage, and we had the heating problem recently, last Monday. The heating problem was fixings with a boiler that were swiftly fixed in the morning, although it took a little bit of a time to heat up the school back to the temperatures that we currently operate on, but it was quickly solved. So it's not and I wouldn't say that that's a reoccurring problem with the boiler. And I'm struggled to comment really to what was the reason to the fault. But as I said, it was quickly fixed. At the same time, you will be aware in terms of the damage that we experienced some damage due to the storm a few weeks back. Some panels from the Gainshaw came off. However, they were fixed back, and we are waiting for the full report from the structural engineers from the manufacturers to see what was the real cost to the damage, will that reoccur. So at the moment we are operating on the precaution that if there was a amber or red wind warning, that we would consider closing the school. Saying that, we would consider closing the school if those weather warnings were in place even before the damage, because that is what we would do in our protocol.
Okay, thanks, Seb. I think what we can do, Jill, is refer it to the States for a more comprehensive technical explanation, and that would maybe help. So if we can take a note of that in the meeting, that we will refer this to the States, the School of States, and get them to comment on your query, if that's okay. Councillor Rees.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Seb. Again, sorry, Ward 2, but I actually partly asking this question of Alison as well, because I think on Monday, Miller Academy was shut as well in Thurso, and I'm just wondering, was that also related to the weather? I don't know, but just a query. And secondly, I think, Chair, I was going to say something, so I'm just turning my camera off because I'm getting a warning the signal's about to go, excuse me. It would be sort of concerning if every time there's an amber warning, the school might have to shut because of the buildings as opposed to risks to travel. I completely agree. If there's an amber warning, any school should be mindful of the safety of the children in terms of travelling back home. But if it's the building that, I mean, I'd support what you're saying, Chair. We need to find an answer quickly to make sure, and if there is any problem with that particular building, what can be done to reduce the worry for the school staff having to assess that particular risk. Thank you.
Okay, Alison, would you like to come back on that one?
Yep, yeah. It was heating. That was the issue at Miller on Monday. The biomass, something happened with that. It's been sorted, and they were back in on Tuesday. But it was heating. It wasn't the wind. When we coming to the panels, Seb and I have been at a couple of different meetings with Properties of the Estate, and they're waiting for the structural report so that it can be fixed properly. When they have new panels on the roof or on the side of the building, then there won't be a problem. It's the fact that it's just keeping it safe for the moment. So they've fixed it so far, but they want to make sure that it's completely fixed. Sorry, that's not very technical, but hopefully you can understand.
No, so is it a biomass boiler at Wick as well? It just seems strange that two boilers both off after a stormy period. Is it something to do with rain getting in and causing the pellets to get damp or something? I'm straying into operational. I do apologise, but I'm interested.
It could be, but I'm sorry, I'm not too sure.
Okay, thank you for that. Alison, for Ward 3 members, I have an up-to-date report from Finlay MacDonald based on the follow-ups I've been having in terms of the panels at Wick High School. From Estates, I'm quite happy to forward that on to all members to bring them up to speed with that. Alison, if you don't mind me making my own comments on this, and I'll start with the building first, because that was let's say that's not it was alarming for me to hear that there just now. I can't believe that we've got a school that is brand spanking new, and for all the forecasting that we've done, that council's done, we are just about to reach capacity next year, and in 2 years' time, we're going to be over capacity. What happened to the forecasting? We also have developer contributions that are based on the school estate, and the forecasts are based on the school estate. And the last time I was looking at the developer contributions to see why they would be being contributed towards Wick High School and others of the new schools, I wasn't aware that the forecasting of the school roll was actually going to go over for any particular period of time. So I'd like to have some information. I know that Alison, you may not have that to hand, but I'd like to get a hold of that. I want to know or maybe Seb, you're aware of it. Have those forecasts changed, and to what extent have we built in flexibility in those forecasts when planning a brand spanking new school? And the very fact that it's not, Seb, you've stated, and I think this has been highlighted, that it's not. It doesn't seem to be fit for purpose for ASN and PSA, delivery. I think that has been highlighted. So what I would like to know is, what are we doing about that to mitigate that challenge that we have? So I'll go to the report in general, Alison, and I have a pet hate about the way that this report is formatted. It's not your fault, but that's the reason. I mean, a lot of the stuff that the officers are saying in the narrative, it does not paint the exact same picture as sometimes what we're getting in the actual report. And what's in the narrative is more important. So we need to get somewhere where we're going to change the formatting of this report. It's not your fault, but maybe that's something I'll take as an action away from this meeting as the chair. We need these reports to be far more reflective of the current situation that we have in our education system in Caithness. For yourself, Alison, forgive me, I have a number of questions. I think folks thought they'd put me in the chair, but I've got my questions all the same. Can you explain for members of the public why there may not be travel plans for Thrumster and Dunbeath in amongst all the travel plans that are actually stated there? One of the issues I have with the report, and I've had it before, it states what the full-time equivalent hours are for staffing, and also what the full-time equivalent hours in the provision in terms of ASN and PSA, but it doesn't benchmark that against why are we reporting it? What's it relevant to? What are the benchmarks? Unless I miss it every time, it just tells us the information, but we don't know, is that suffice? Is it not suffice? Is there something that we have to do about it? It just gives us a bunch of figures. I notice as well that there's a substantial amount, some substantial amounts of funding that are being carried forward, and I wonder, is that common practice? Is that like, do they deal with that like they do with the reserves of council, where you have a certain amount of a kind of bunch going forward? What is that? Why is that these funding amounts being carried forward, and what is the plan in terms of that? What's the relevance in terms of that? In terms of the suitability of the condition and suitability of our schools, as Seb said there just now, it doesn't really tell us that much, giving it an A, B, or a C. But the other thing is, we don't actually see it in terms of how it's ranked amongst the rest of the school estate throughout the Highlands. We have no idea where the Caithness schools fit in there, and members require information that helps us shape our thinking when it comes to the challenges of capital strategy, because the same amount of money that we, in terms of capital, we have challenges either asking us, do we spend it on roads? And you can see in Caithness how big a demand there is for that. But that's the same, if we take money and put it on roads, how many schools do we have to take out of the picture? And we need to see it. So we need to make decisions in terms of prioritising where the capital spend is right across the plethora. Something to be spent in Caithness that might mean an opportunity hit in somebody else's area. So seeing Caithness in its own light is fine. We kind of know what the condition of the schools are there and their suitability. I'd like to see that in terms of other schools. The one big positive of this, Seb, hats off to everybody and hats off to the teachers of Wick High School. I love seeing the positive destination information. If you actually get, it's the one thing that makes it all right, no matter what the challenges are in the school estate in Caithness, our kids do really, really well for all of that. The only one thing that I would note in there is it does say unemployed not seeking is up to 4.3%. And again, that's a figure that we get in this report, but there's no narrative as to why that might be. So I'd like a little comment on that. What I would say though is we do have brand spanking new schools in Wick. We tore down four schools, I think it was, to be able to get these schools built. They are the envy of many other people in the Highland Council. While we have brand spanking new schools, there are many members clambering over each other in chamber, wondering who's going to get their new school next. We aren't in that position, and I'm just disappointed that we are now reflecting on the fact that the school that we have built may not have the capacity to teach generally. So you can understand I'm trying to balance my concerns between my delight at this report and let's see if we can get a different report format, Alison. It's not your problem. I know that. Please don't take that personally. But let's get it referred up to the High Hegians and let's get this report in a far better fashion than it actually is. And I'm sorry for taking so long. I didn't time myself, but I'm probably well over my own time limit.
Okay, I agree with you with the report, Councillor Bremner, and in fact I wrote a proposal which I think Nikki gave to you maybe about 6 months ago, and it was about visiting schools and how and I also know that we're going to be bringing toward business meetings the assessment reports for each of the ESGs, and we're actually going to be starting doing that in March if there's space for us in the agenda. I think what we had suggested before about getting out into schools, really seeing what's happening and being partnerships, councillors, head teachers, etc., is a really good way forward. But unfortunately, we can't do that at the moment because of the restrictions of COVID. But that's the way we would like to move forward. And so therefore the report then, as you say, reflecting something that you can actually measure against and you can understand better. So there's a lot of things you asked about there that I can't, you know, why do they give the staffing and the ASN? I mean, that's the report I'm given. It's, to me, it's so that you understand how many staff we do have who are additional support for learning compared to the number of children that we have who are level 3 and 4. When we come to the building and the forecasting role, I think the forecasting, and this is, I wasn't there at the time, but I believe the forecasting role was actually to be less. We didn't expect WIC to be, and this is a positive thing, we didn't expect WIC to be attracting so many people. I don't know, I'm just saying this personally, but is it something to do with COVID? Seb will be better than me at answering, but I know that a couple of years ago there were quite a number, and the last couple of years she's had a lot more young people coming into the area. So, you know, it could be that, it could be jobs, it could be, I don't know. But I think that forecast was inaccurate to what we've got today. Seb and I had a meeting yesterday with Properties and Facility, and we're having a look at how can we go forward. So, I mean, Seb was saying to them that this is a priority, we need to move quickly. Do we do something over the next year that just keeps us going, which we might have to do? Or is there a new, do we have to change the building in some kind of way? So they're going to do a technical report in the next couple of weeks. And then Seb and I have asked for a tight time scale within that. So they're coming back to us and they'll tell us how we might move forward with, 1, building capacity, and 2, an issue that has been there for a while, to change the additional support for learning environment. So I'm not sure if I answered all your questions there, but you can come back to me if I haven't.
Alison, I'm quite happy to send all of the questions to you so that you can come back with more substantive answers to me, but I'm sure you've noted them there just now. Before I bring Councillor Mackay in, I would just like to thank you for saying that there just now, because that is exactly the point I'm making in this report. We have actually a challenge ahead of us, and it's a challenge because there may be good news there. We've been asking to see if we can get our population increased and for people to stay in Caithness. It's one of the big challenges that we've all been looking for, and here we actually might have a good news story that is giving us a good news challenge. That's not identified in this report, nor has it been part of the context that Seb's given there just now. We need that to be the case. So thanks very much for both of you giving us that overview. It looks as though this actually might be a good news challenge that we're looking at. Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm delighted with the report. Thank you, Sebastian and Alison. I'm a wee bit confused but delighted on the school roll forecast, because one of the highlights we had across the county started 3 years ago about the dramatic decrease in population forecast for Caithness. Now, Highland Council said it was going to drop by 21% quite rapidly. But bearing in mind Doonray and people moving south, etc., etc., the NHS projected a decline from 26,000 to 23. Matthew, I think you remember highlighting that in the paper several years ago. So I'm delighted to see that there is people moving into the area and the role will be increased. Okay, you've got a bit of confusion here as to where you're going to put them. But I can assure you, having followed the progress of the high school over the last 10 years, I remember when Professor Bakey launched his campaign for a new high school. He was very good, and if we hadn't have pushed it, we wouldn't have that facility now. I know at least 5 or 6 towns and villages in with the Big Ben here in Highland Council who are desperate for a new school, and they would love to have our facility that we have in Wick. Irrespective of the problems we've had, I know it's been challenging, but we're there, and I'm proud of that school as it is, because repairs are being done. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, it's well said, Councillor Mackay there. We've been looking for the population good news, and here we have it, but you can't read it in the report. Members, are there any other queries or questions or comments that you want to make in this report? If not, the recommendations are before you. Can I ask you if we can accept the recommendations and thank Alison and Seb for their contributions today? Members, are we accepting the report and the recommendations?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thanks very much, Alison and Seb, and we'll see you again in the future, and hopefully it might be a better formatted report by then, Alison. Thanks for your attendance. Members, can we please pause the recording? Okay, members, we now move on to item 7 of the agenda. It is the Caithness HRA Capital Programme 2022 to 23. And we have Brian Cameron. I hope that Brian's with us to speak to this report. Brian, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. If it's okay with yourself, I'll just do a very quick introduction to it as such, and then obviously happy to field questions afterwards. So this report provides details of the Housing Revenue Account capital resources for Caithness for 2022-23. And it provides a proposed programme of works based on discussion previously with local officers and members. Firstly, I'd like to make a quick apology. There's an amendment required at section 5.7 in the report. The figures there don't tally up with the figures in the appendix, so apologies in regard to that. I can confirm that the figures in the appendix are the correct ones, and members will be pleased to know they correspond to what was provided at the ward business meeting previously. So firstly, apologies in regard to that. As with previous Caithness capital programmes, the focus has been on carrying out a mix of works to maintain and improve the housing stock. This involves a life cycle approach to replacing elements such as bathrooms, kitchens, windows and doors, where the maintenance team have identified these as priorities for replacement based on age and property condition. Other priorities for 2022-23 include investment to improve the energy efficiency of our housing stock. It's worth noting at this stage that the Council is currently assessing the energy efficiency of our housing stock in line with a national review regarding climate change and energy efficiency targets. Future reports will of course have to be submitted to Housing and Property Committee and the Climate Change Working Group, and that will have an impact in terms of some of the future long-term investment priorities across Highland, and that will also be reported at an area basis. The list of proposed projects for the next financial year is at Appendix 1. Just draw members' attention very quickly to the adaptations budget. It's an essential principle of delivering works to tenants that require medical adaptations, and that's been very successful over the years. And I'd also like to reference the environmental improvements budget for 2022-23. It's a member-led budget. It works really well when members and tenants are in contact and we get that local feedback about works which means something at a local level. And I would encourage that level of engagement to take place again, as has happened successfully in the past. I'm happy to take questions, Chair.
Thanks for the brief overview there just now. It's welcome. Councillor Rosie.
Thanks. Hello, Brian. It was good to see you again. Thanks for the report. Really interesting. You probably answered the questions I was going to touch on, but aids and adaptation, I think it'd be interesting to note, or if we could uncover in the future just how much impact it has on keeping people in their own homes when there are medical issues. It's really interesting. I don't know whether I'm seeing you nodding your head there, but there's a lot of discussion going on around this in a redesign process for health and social care in Caithness. So it's good to see a figure. I don't know if we can understand that. Yeah, and you're right about you touched on tenants forums. I've attended, I think it's 3 over recent months, and they're fantastic forums, and it's so good to see, community members being involved and making decisions and being consulted. So I think it's a really, it's a really good initiative. And I was glad to see in reference to, a contingency plan with finance being carried forward. So, it suggests that we're ahead of the game. Can you give us any more? Final question I was going to have was about the energy efficiency standard for social housing. So is it quite simple? It's just going to inform what level of long-term investment we will make as council, or will there be additional national funding being made available is a final question, Brian. Thank you.
Are you okay, Chair, if I just answer those questions now?
Yes, if Councillor Rosie's finished.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Rosie. Some good comments and questions there. In terms of adaptations, you've hit the nail on the head. Keeping people in their homes, being able to live independently in their own houses. You know, obviously there can be discussion had with tenants to see if a change of house might be more appropriate to the circumstances, but the whole point of the adaptations budget is to help people stay on and sustain their tenancies. And if it's a walk-in shower or a handrail or whatever else the type of work is recommended by occupational therapy and occupational health, you know, that's the whole point of it. In terms of the tenant forum, yes, lots of lively discussion there. The last tenant forum was a couple of weeks ago. One of the actions from it, you'd be pleased to know, is myself and Mandy McClellan have to set up an energy efficiency group with the tenants. So lots of interest amongst our tenants in terms of how we spend their rent money and how green do we want our future capital programme to be. So there was lively discussion at the last tenant forum, and there's lots more work for myself and my colleagues involved in that. But it's good that our tenants are getting their voices heard. Just going on to the third question there about investment. As it stands at the minute, we've got a 1% rent increase, which was approved at Housing and Property Committee recently for next financial year. That's well below inflation. It's well below what most housing associations and other councils in Scotland have proposed for next financial year. If we want to get to a far higher degree of energy efficiency within our housing stock, it will require significantly more investment. There's a big debate asked to come, which will have to go to future committees, a big political debate as to should that be financed primarily through our tenants' rent accounts? What lobbying can we do with government and utility companies to get them paying towards it? I think it's going to be a huge topic for the coming years. Importantly, one of the things coming out of the tenant forum, one of the things that's come out of the likes of the Caithness tenant survey previously, we need that feedback from tenants as to what their priorities might want to be, how much they might be willing to see future investment directed primarily towards energy works, how much do they want the balance of the programme to maybe remain as it is, where there's a balance of works, kitchens, bathrooms, that type of thing. So lots of issues there. For myself, it probably mean a lot more reports back to members and a lot more recommendations and a lot more discussion. Thank you, Chair.
Any other queries, questions, comments? Not seeing any hands up. Councillor Mackay.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just come in. Yes, sorry. I'm very interested in adaptations. I've seen lots going on in the county, and it's been very successful. But I do see several times there where people shy away. They don't want adaptations. They can manage on their own. So is the message getting out there that, look, there's a lot available here to help you around the house? And is it the same for private homeowners? Are they able to access the adaptations as well? Brian.
Brian, do you want to come back on that one?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, Councillor Mackay. I think it's quite a good point you're raising there. I've always looked at it in the point of view, if we can get the medical adaptations done as quickly as possible from a council point of view, because I'm very conscious that a tenant might have been waiting several months to be seen by occupational therapy. So the quicker we can actually take the referral, discuss it with occupational therapy, and move towards actual works taking place. I've always had that primarily in my head. I'll maybe speak to my colleagues involved in the tenant participation side of things, just to see if it's maybe something we can maybe include in a future tenant newsletter. That there might be a bit something in there in terms of maybe some tenants maybe holding back in terms of requesting the works, requesting the occupational therapy referrals in the first place. So I'll maybe see if I can do a bit more digging just to see if in practice if that's happening. I suppose it's a little bit like putting in transfer applications for housing. We have over the years noticed that a lot of tenants have maybe waited until they're getting a bit older and maybe not quite as mobile as such before then put in a transfer application for, say, a bungalow or whatever. So I'll do a wee bit of digging there, Councillor Mackay, and see if I can get a bit more information there, and just to see if it's maybe something worth flagging up to tenants. In terms of private house owners, this council scheme of assistance, and that does do a kind of assessment as through the council's grant officers, so that there are means of assistance out there, possibly not quite to the same level as for the house and revenue account where we've got that ring-fence budget. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks.
Thank you. Brian.
I don't see any other hands up. Brian, I hope you don't mind if you take a couple of questions from myself. Thanks very much for the presentation for those of us who were in attendance at the Housing and Property Committee last week. It was, and you and I had a lot of dialogue there. A couple of things. First one, you referenced the Caithness tenant survey. Is that the member-led one, or is that a council one?
I think that's the one where I know members were heavily involved. I've just always called it the Caithness survey, but I know members were involved. I think you were at the forefront of it and just making sure that tenants were consulted with in terms of future recommendations, and I think that's where the windows and doors were coming out as the kind of tenant voice. So I hope I've got the right one there, Councillor Bremner. I was actually speaking to Mandy McClellan yesterday about maybe revisiting that again. So again, it's something where it's maybe about combining some of the resources there to do that. So happy for feedback in terms of that. It is a bit resource intensive, and I think I'm always wary about surveying too often at times. Sometimes it can feel a bit of overkill, but more than happy to get feedback in terms of that.
Thank you. That was what I was hoping that you were going to say, because I'm now going to come back to you on exactly what you've said there just now. I know that Councillor Tilt wasn't part of this. It was prior to Councillor Tilt being elected, so I'm sure she'll appreciate the update on this. Yes, it was a member-led survey. The reason that was the case is because the environmental monies that are available for members. Every year we were doing a walk and talk and a walkabout. Councillor Mackay will recall that very well. He fed into it a lot. And I see that the environmental spend is still sitting at 5% of the budget, which is 47,000. It's in Appendix 1, 47,000 as part of 940. We part of our discussions. And it's noted in previous minutes of meetings, and I think that could be what you're referring to in terms of taking it forward. This could have fallen between the cracks since Jonathan Henderson has probably moved on, but what we were hoping to see was that 5% was actually going to increase in terms of our ability to be able to determine where the spend was going. Now, if you could confirm to us what that can increase to. Is it 15%, as I understand it? And the Caithness tenant survey that we undertook reflected, as you correctly said, we thought that it would reflect heating appliances, but it came back to us as doors and windows. We would expect, and this is probably for your future consideration, but immediate consideration, I was hoping that we would have seen some sort of reflection in that survey having a direct influence on the HRA programme, capital programme that we've got in front of us today. Can you confirm if it has, or how do we take that forward? Because I noticed that you're saying that you would like to revisit that. So let's do that. I'm going to suggest to you that you come to the next monthly housing meeting. That's where we have that kind of nitty-gritty discussion. Maybe a nod of the head from my Ward 3 colleagues might help determine that, and Ward 2 colleagues and that gives us that'll allow you to maybe have an in-depth discussion with us in terms of where our understanding of the Caithness tenant survey, as you called it, is leading us. What do you think on that, Brian?
I'm fine, Councillor Bremner, in terms of attending that meeting. In regard to the environmental capital budget, again, it is a member-led budget as such.
Mm-hmm.
It has happened before where if members identify it's a local priority, and I know, having spoken to the maintenance team, they've got plenty of windows and doors, for example, where they've identified on their wish list. I would say it's a relatively straightforward decision for the members here today, if you wish to do it at this juncture. So I don't want to preempt that, but it is within your power if you want to make, assign that portion of the budget over or part of it over to specifically windows and doors or something else which you've identified as a local priority. So I'm more than open to that discussion happening. I think from an officer point of view, there's plenty of work that needs to be done in Caithness, and it's just about trying to direct the work to where it's most needed as such. So happy to take that forward. If not today, then certainly at that future meeting.
Yeah, I think that I'm happy to hear what my other colleagues have got to say about it. But certainly the 47,000 that's identified at the moment could easily be transferred. It's not going to be spent on the normal environmental budget things that we did, because we exhausted that. We exhausted the areas where we could spend that. We were going about walking and visiting all the areas with the Rate Your Estate, and we were starting to exhaust the areas where we could get a reasonable spend and know that it was being well spent. We didn't want to get to the point where we were spending for the sake of spending. So I think that 47,000 is now ready to be allocated to probably doors and windows. But there was a consideration that the environmental budget should actually increase from 5% to a bigger percentage, and I think it was about 15%. And what we would like to evidence is how that has influenced the HRA capital programme delivery. We need to let folks see a tangible, a material change in the HRA capital delivery as a result of the tenant survey. And I think that's what needs to be discussed at the next housing meeting. So if you're happy to take that on board, and if other members are happy for that to happen, with a nod of the head. And I'm sure we can, rather than put that as an additional action or recommendation, that we just have that as a note of the meeting, and yeah, that'll be in the minute. Members, are there any other comments to make? Other than that, I'll thank Brian very much for his attendance today, and thank him for the ability to be able to hit the environmental budget on the head there just now. Brian, have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay, that is item 7, undertaken. Members, we are going to item 10. Allow me to scroll up. I'm not one of the ones that has material. Item 10 is the reallocation of Highland Council place-based investment stroke COVID funds. And on this, given the nature of the recommendations that are in front of us, I would ask members if they are happy. That will require us to suspend standing orders. Are members happy so to do?
Great.
Agreed.
Nobody is dissenting. Thanks very much.
Chair, sorry, could there be a proposer and a seconder?
Okay, I'm happy to propose. Can I have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. Happy with that?
Yes.
Good stuff. Okay, on item 10, I have Mac. I believe that you're speaking to this item.
Yeah, I am. Good afternoon, Chair, members. Thanks for letting me put this forward. The report closely follows on from Alan Webster's item, the item 9, and it's been developed in line with members' expectations and after numerous discussions at ward business meetings and special ward business meetings. So I thank the members for their sort of support and help on that. For a bit of background, I think if we go to 1.1 to sort of let us know how we got here. Initially, there was £100,000 place-based investment. Important to remind members it was Highland Council place-based investment, not to be confused with the Scottish Government one. Was allocated to each ward for that financial year. The Ward 2 members agreed to allocate £60,000 of that place-based investment to carry out drainage works at the Dammies. A further £15,000 was required. So at a later committee meeting on the 3rd of November, we had, or you had agreed to repurpose some COVID response funds, and that gave the project a total of £75,000. Now, since those decisions had been made, the Scottish Government place-based funds had come along, and I think the thought process behind this really was that the Scottish Government place-based funds more closely fitted the Dammies project, and so we're looking to remove the Highland Council place-based funds, the £60,000 and the £15,000 COVID fund from that, and that's what we're here to do. Now, those funds, if we go to 2.1, those funds we are looking for you to agree to reallocate £60,000, previously allocated to the St George's Park project, and reallocate £15,000, as I said earlier on. If agreed, we're going to allocate £60,000 to the active travel. £20,000 of that will be for community projects or community member projects. £30,000 will be in conjunction with, or rather spent on initial projects that the Thurso active travel plan had been agreed and highlighted, with match funding from the active travel. So that 30,000 will effectively become 60, and 10,000 to investigate the creation of a community amenities equipment scheme. And really what that means is buying or leasing grass machinery for the community councils to be able to access. But that's, again, that's early stages just now. If agreed to reallocate that £15,000, then we would be looking to put that £15,000, sorry, in of COVID investment funds to a grant fund. And while we were discussing that, we had also thought that we would do the same with the remaining COVID funds, the remaining COVID money in Ward 3. And again, that's to sort of inject a degree of flexibility in those funds as well. The harms of COVID, if you maybe imagine that it's sort of more blurred lines than it used to be. So it's to give members flexibility to respond to those issues as they come. I don't have much more to say in it, but I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks for that, Mac. And just to emphasise that, particularly for Ward 3, it's necessary before the 31st of March for that flexibility to be put in place, hence why we're suspending standing orders and talking about it just now. Members, do any of you have any queries? I know that we've already kind of done and dusted this, but it needs to be in the public domain. Carl, sorry, Councillor Rosie. I will get used to calling everybody Councillor today.
Thank you, Chair. And Mac, thank you. Just listening to your summary and navigating us through the various interpretations of what each fund means. I'm still not sure I understand it. No, I'm being flippant, but it was a complicated process. And sincerely thank you for your assistance that you gave us. I've got there's a wee bit of negative here and a huge positive. I'll go with a negative first. I think it's important that we touch on St George's Park. Dammies well understand what it is and where it is. But I think it's really unfortunate that there was some negative press recently. So personally, I think as members, Ward 2 members, we should resolve to engage to understand the issues and see if there's whatever resolution we can find. So I'm sure we can work with you towards that, Mac. think there's moving on the positive. I think there's a real opportunity to work with sports clubs and third sector per se to develop the facility and improve the standards. So it's really good. Looking at the rest of the report, absolutely fantastic, from proposals with Highland. I mean, it touches so many things. Then, you know, it links into Caithness Cares, a mental health and wellbeing action plan, so many other third sector organisations. So I'm absolutely delighted to support the recommendation. So thanks again, Mac.
Okay, if there are no other comments from councillors, are we happy to accept the recommendations on page 57 at item 2.1? Okay, I think that we have that agreement, Mark, and thanks for your presentation, and thanks for your work to date in terms of this item. Members, we move on to item 11 of the agenda. Item 11 of the agenda is the Highland Council Coastal Communities Fund, and it's an assessment of applications report. I believe that we have Fiona. Do we have Fiona with us? Yes, we do. There she is on the screen. Nice to see you today, Fiona. Fiona, I have one little correction that I'm going to ask you if we can draw attention to. I think you know what it is. We've actually got another figure of 89,000 for the public convenience in Wick. As much as I would love that to be another 89,000, I think the correct figure is 50,000. We have already agreed the 89,000 at a previous report today. Would you like to clarify that for members? And I'll leave you then to get on with making a presentation of your report. Thank you very much.
It's great, thank you, Chair, and afternoon, members. And yes, that's absolutely correct to say that I have muddled the figures there slightly. So for the sake of clarity, the application from the Highland Council for Wick Whitechapel toilets to Coastal Communities Fund is for £50,000 of Coastal Communities funding. And I think I had updated that in some of the papers and not in the RAG spreadsheet. So what I can then clarify is that the figure in the committee covering report is correct. So the total value of applications under consideration today is £99,882.15. And currently the Caithness area has a remaining budget of £98,823. So what the first thing I would just draw members' attention to is that if you wish to approve both projects in front of you today, we would just ask you to also take a decision to formally draw down in advance £1,059.14 from the new allocation that's due to come to the Caithness area for coastal communities for distribution during 2022. And for information, I can confirm that that new allocation will be £399,709.66. So as I say, there are two projects under consideration today. I'm happy to just give you a very quick overview, if that's okay, Chair, of the two projects, and maybe draw your attention to a couple of main points and then take any questions. So the first one is Wick Whitechapel toilets. And as you will see from our assessment, I think what I would stress with both these projects is that they are eligible. They've scored well in the RAG and the technical assessments, and there's no reason from our point of view not to approve them. But we would flag up just that there are perhaps some concerns around areas where we've marked them as amber, and that might suggest that conditions are approval rather than presenting. So going ahead and funding them. So in the case of Wick Whitechapel toilets, I think you would be aware that there is still an outstanding amount of match funding for the project. So total cost of the project is 254,000 with an application to us for 50,000. And as I understand from what you've just said, Chair, the place-based funding also being agreed today for 89,000 goes some way towards addressing that shortfall. So we would still be looking to secure an amount of £50,000 for the project from the Tourism Infrastructure Fund. And I also believe that the project would be looking to then cover a further shortfall of 65,000, potentially through loan finance if there's a way of working in partnership with another group to deliver that. But certainly that's one of the concerns we would have. We would also still need to see planning permission and building warrants in place for the project, but as with most capital projects, these would only be progressed once the full funding package is in place. So as I say, no specific concerns about the project, and that's just really, if you've discussed it already today, you're probably aware of the work that's being undertaken, so I won't dwell on that too much and take up too much of your time. The other project is an application for High Life Highland, and it's for £49,882.85, which is for 100% of the project costs. And this is a project that would be delivering a programme of supported wellbeing activities across Ward 2, particularly targeted at those that are experiencing or are at risk of poor outcomes and quality of life. The main costs in the project are salaries, so the project would create 3 new posts, 1 coordinator, 1 youth support officer and 1 assistant youth worker. And then the bulk of the other costs are around actually delivering the activities. And you would see I've suggested a condition that we just need to clarify procurement around that, as a lot of that would potentially be delivered by Highland Services, but I don't have a concern about that. We just want to have that signed off before the project goes ahead. So as I've said, there is no match funding required for that project. So on the basis that funding was approved by yourselves today, that one would be ready to start. And I think that's a very quick overview, but I'm certainly happy to take any questions that members have. Thank you.
I'll up to questions, but just before I do, and with reference to one of the applications that you have there, Fiona, if you come along to a meeting at 4 o'clock, which is specifically around the very project that you're talking about, you'll get a full update on all the other finance thing that's been put in place for that, including. So I'll open up. I know you all know about this and you've all contributed to it. It's been great, but does anybody is going to agree with the recommendations? Councillor Rosie and Councillor Mackay, you're not letting me down today. Councillor Rosie first.
Yeah, look, again, look, I can only thank you, officers. It's, you know, I reread the papers for us this morning and touching so many things. So, you know, thanks to Fiona and Mac again. I really look forward to seeing how this develops. And I think investment is exactly where we need to be putting the monies into. So thank you, and I agree with recommendations. Thanks.
Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, of course, absolutely wonderful projects here. Let's be honest, we get hammered every day around the county about our roads, but we equally get hammered about the toilet facilities in Wick. And Councillor Chair, Councillor Bremner, you've done a lot of work on this yourself, and well done. And we're on our way. We're on our way, well on our way to achieving this goal. And well done to everybody, including yourself, Chair. A lot of work into this project. Activities, I love activities, absolutely sports oriented. This county is very sports oriented, and I wish Highland well with our activities up there in the Thurso area. So well done to everybody. Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, Willie. If there are no other questions or queries, I'm happy to ask members to agree to support the recommendations as contained in the agenda item on this report. Are you happy so to do?
Great.
There you go, Fiona. Nice, easy item for you today, and we look forward to speaking to you about the next amount of Highland Coastal Communities funding, which the public will be absolutely delighted to find out that we've managed to secure for Caithness, and we'll see about that in the very near future. Have a nice day, Fiona.
Great, thank you. Thanks, members.
Thanks, Fiona.
Members, that would normally be us at the end of the agenda. However, I have one emergency item that I would like. It will not take us but a couple of minutes. And the reason I have for bringing it forward today is because it has just recently been announced that Wick Street Design has, the project has secured £150,000 as for stages 3 and 4 of Sustrans. We need the council needs to get going with this because it is going to be time limited to March 2023, and we know that the pre-election period will be starting just in short after the middle of March, and therefore I think it's really important that the update is given now. And I want to thank Mark Gregg, who's taken some time out to deliver a short brief. I will open it up for questions, but it mainly is to bring members up to date of exactly what this means for Wick. And I hope that Ward 2 members are happy to hear about a good news story for Ward 3. Mark, over to yourself.
Afternoon, members. Thank you, Chair. So I'm just going to just cover a quick background to the project and also inform you of the next steps. So just to give you the overview, the Highland Council, in partnership with the Royal Borough Wick Community Council, submitted a Places for Everyone application to Sustrans in March 2019 for a 12-month collaborative design process through the Street Design Programme. The project team was led by Sustrans, who worked collaboratively with the local community of Wick between September 2019 and October 2020 on stages 1 and 2. The aim of the stage of the project was to develop a concept design that would create a warm and welcoming, a more attractive public place, a comfortable and safe environment to walk, wheel and cycle, better travel experiences through Wick Town Centre, particularly when accessing local facilities, a sense of identity for the town centre of Wick, drawing on local culture and heritage. The concept design looked at ways to improve the Market Square area along with the High Street, adjoining Market Square and the Bridge Street Junction. The conclusion of the concept design was that it represented the community's aspiration for how a redesigned space could look, with a more engaged and empowered community supportive of the proposed concept design. The concept design handbook was handed over to the Highland Council once all local engagement had been completed, so that the Highland Council could start the developed design, the technical design stage, which will form the tender documents. So for that to happen, in September 21, a newly formed project team had applied for the Sustrans Place for Everyone stages 3 and 4 funding, so the project could be progressed to full design stages. The funding of the stage was for a total 150k, which Councillor Brenner covered, which was to be fully committed from Sustrans. It was confirmed on January 26 that the Highland Council was successful in their funding application to Sustrans. Funding is specific to this project to continue with the detailed design stage and will have to be used by March 2023. So the next steps now are, with the funding now secured, officers, including myself, began forming the project team, which included a design team, which we carried out in-house by our project design unit. We have had continual engagement through the application process till now with the Royal Borough of Wick Community Council, who will continue to be key stakeholders. The works are continuing now to identify other stakeholders who will form part of the project team and working with the community. As part of the funding, we're seeking to appoint a part-time project manager locally. We'll keep working with stakeholders to help shape the design and meet its objectives set out in stages 1 and 2. Works are ongoing in forming the job description and will be advertised in due course. We're underway and setting up a web page which we will upload all the project information along with an email address set up for any questions, queries that can be submitted by the community and answered by council officers. During the stage 3 design process, there will be ongoing consultation sessions with the community, surveys, street trials, accessibility engagement and regular communication displayed through the website, social media and through the local press. We are looking to host the first of these engagement sessions in Wick at the end of the month, beginning of March. That will be advertised in due course. This will allow the public to come along and be provided with a full update on where we are currently, along with a chance to ask questions. It will give us a good opportunity to bring everyone up to speed with a project that essentially sat dormant through COVID. So it's bringing everyone back to the forefront of everyone's mind, so that have been involved through the process. Once we get that done, we'll be ongoing with the stage 3 design. Once we get that signed off, that'll bring it to a technical design stage, which will be prepared and ready for sending out for tender. At that point, we will have to resubmit application for stage 5 and 6 funding, which will be 70% funding committed by Sustrans, and the Highland Council will have to match 30% of that. The project will continue, as I said, to work with the community to look to provide a design that meets the expectation created from the concept design stage. If required, I can circulate the handover document, which can be circulated to members after this meeting, and happy to take any questions. Hopefully you took all that in.
Very well done, Mark. Members, another excellent news story here. Another pot of ring-fenced monies available to those who put the effort in to try and get it. Again, this is money that will not be able to be spent on roads or on potholes or on anything other than what we have got the bid in for. And the criteria as well, detailed on the internet, if you want to go and see it there. This is a great update. Thanks very much, Mark, for putting this together at such late notice. And I'll open it up to members for their comments or their queries or just their acknowledgements. Everybody absolutely delighted with it. You've got, I mean, it is what it says on the tin. The fact is that if we get this over the line, then it's a potential £1.6 million investment that's going to be undertaken in Wick. And if we don't go for it, somebody else can. And we've been up against that stiff competition for the past while. So, and Wick will certainly benefit from it. So with that, Mark, it does not, I think members are appreciating the fact that you came along to give us that overview. And it also allows it to be put into the public domain. And we'll bid you good day for have a nice rest of the day. See you later, Mark.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
Cheers. Members, we're at the end of the meeting. Thanks very much for your participation today and for your contributions. If we can stop the recording, please.